Cultfigga TV. Revolutionary salute. Revolutionary salute. Like, share, subscribe. Welcome to the House of Revolution. You know I'm your humble host, the Yao Mean of Revolution. Tomorrow, the Middle East goes dark. Iran is warning Trump, but he won't listen. Before we get into that, be sure to wipe your feet. That means hit the like button. You in the House of Revolution. Like, share, subscribe, support the platform, y'all. We are at the brink of devastation. We're already at humiliation. Trump won't listen, but I think he's finna hasten and speed up the fall of the empire. Let's get into the content. Salute.
Last night, President Trump started a countdown clock, a 48-hour ultimatum he gave to Iran. Open the Straits of Hormuz, or he will effectively open the gates of hell against Iran.
We'll see.
Now, what was the reaction from Iran? What is the action of Israel? What is the action of the United States since that time? Where are things going now? I'll tell you first, right off the top, they're not going anywhere good. We are heading into some real troubled waters, and so far the ultimatum has had the opposite effect of what President Trump may have hoped. It has hardened and solidified opposition in Iran. It has hardened and solidified the position of Israel, and the United States continues to just send more military power into the region. All signs indicate we are on the way to escalation. That is terrible news for the entire region. It's bad news for Israel. It's bad news for the U.S. military. Nobody is going to win in this situation here. It's bad news for our regional allies. This has been one of the most disastrous starts of a war that can be imagined. And the problem is there's a lot of room for it to get worse. We got to just be honest with it. You hear, folks, this is not in a good situation. Let's take a look at one of the reasons why that you might not think. And that is what happened after President Trump last night gave his ultimatum. And there was an attack. Let's see. It was attacking Dimona. Notice this incoming missile. One of the most dramatic shots I've seen in this war of an incoming missile. This is in Dimona, and you can see no air defense missile intercepted this. It just came straight in and hit straight on its target. Now, there were some other angles, actually quite a number of angles of this in various released on X last night. And you could see that there was a lot of missiles in the air. That's one of the big ones that went through. There was some attempted air defense missiles going up, but like all these cases, even in those cases where you do have some intercepts, and there have periodically been some, percentage-wise, they're very low. And all the Iranians have to do is send enough missiles to overcome whatever there may be in interceptors. Or there may be some cases like this where there didn't appear to be any. It just came through because there are not enough interceptor missiles to go around. Well, let's take a look at what happened when that missile hit the ground, because it was pretty substantial. Actually, there was a couple last night. Let's see if I got this one here. There's a couple last night that struck. This here is some video of Dimona, and you can see that there were 59 casualties sent to the hospital. As it turned out, miraculously, there were no casualties or no deaths here. Second strike happened in the city of Arad, not far from Beersheba. 80 people were wounded, including some seriously. Air defenses were activated, but failed to intercept the missiles, as you continue to see, and that's a growing problem here. And you see over and over that this is already starting to get into a war of attrition, and it's a war of capabilities. If we think we had enough missiles to start this war, we had enough to have a short, sharp clash. That's it. We didn't have enough to have a sustained war. This is something I've been trying to get through to anyone who would listen in the U.S. government since before this thing ever started, is that we don't have the industrial capacity to sustain a long war over time. It is now graphically playing out right before your eyes. So we said, the Iron Dome, this great thing, it's nearly impervious. 90% they say captured. Well, obviously that's no longer the case, or it's never been the case. Now it's no longer even pretended, because it's self-evident that that's not the case. Well, the likelihood is then that whatever Iran continues to hit, it's going to get through. Now, we've seen both President Trump, you've heard lots of people on the major media. You've heard the admiral in charge of CENTCOM, Admiral Cooper, They keep saying, "Oh, we've knocked this stuff down like 90%." The Iranian missiles launching, they're way down from where they started. Secretary Hegseth this past week in some of his press conferences, we keep getting stronger, they keep getting weaker. Well, that's literally the opposite of what's happening. We're having fewer interceptor missiles that we have. We're having fewer long-range standoff weapons than we had. So by definition, our inventories are getting weaker. Meanwhile, the Iranians, because they did plan ahead and they did plan for a war that they could sustain over time, by all accounts, do have enough inventory to maintain a steady rate of fire. And we're seeing that. So after a significant reduction in the amount of drones and missiles that they fired after the first, I guess it was about the 5 or 6 day mark, it got down really low. But then since that time, it has started to slowly tick back up. And at least the last chart I saw was through day 19. Today is day 23. They continued to increase each day. And according to the Iranian side, they had always held in support and in reserve some of their better, newer stuff. They were shooting a lot of their older stuff, they said. Now that it seems that maybe there was some truth to that. Maybe it wasn't just bluster, because more things are getting through and they're firing better missiles that have huge striking power. This is only going to continue. Well, predictably, these strikes, if Iran's intent is to bring the reality of the war to Israel and show them, well, you can't sustain this over time, so we need to have an end to this. If that was the intent, it's certainly not going to be the result. Let me show you actually what Benjamin Netanyahu said in his defiant stance right after that, not Beersheba, but Dimona. This is in Dimona where I showed you that missile striking. Here's what he had to say this morning.
Right next to the holy sites of the three monotheistic faiths, the Western Wall, the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, and the Al-Aqsa Mosque. And by dint of a miracle again, none of them were hurt, but they were targeting the holy sites of the three major monotheistic religions. Third, they fired an intercontinental ballistic missile on Diego Garcia. That's 4,000 kilometers. I've been warning all the time. They have now the capacity to reach deep into Europe. They already have fired on a European country, Cyprus. They are putting everyone in their sights. And fourth, they're stopping a maritime international route, energy route, and trying to blackmail the entire world. What more proof do you need that this regime that threatens the entire world has to be stopped? Israel and the United States are working together for the entire world.
Yeah, he keeps hitting that same theme there. This is not just for us. This is not just for America. This is for the entire world. We need everybody to come together. He is desperately trying and now using this as an opportunity to try and get all the Gulf Arab states to join physically in the war, not just in support or in, saying that we'll help you with some, off the books help. No, he wants them to actually act. Of course, he's also trying to get European countries. He wants them physically in the war. It's always been Netanyahu's intent to draw as many people into the war on his side. He obviously succeeded with the United States. Now he's trying to get others in there. So far from being cowed by what happened here and the fact that their air defense systems are being exposed as being very porous, instead of saying, hey, let's get this war over with, he's saying, let's escalate it. Let's ramp it up, because he really does want to completely destroy Iran. That's been his objective from the beginning. And if you needed any more proof of that, he provided that as well today. Sorry, let me get the right one here. This is what he was told Fox News this morning, just hours ago. This is his objectives in the war.
What does victory look like in this campaign?
Well, we've defined two clear goals. One is to break completely their nuclear program, break completely their missile program, break completely their capacity to produce the components for both of these programs. We're well on our way on achieving it. We've also set a goal of creating conditions for the Iranian people to overthrow this tyranny that has tormented them and made life miserable and is making life miserable for the entire world. And I hope we achieve that too.
So you see very clearly, he is setting about these total objectives of the complete destruction of the Iranian state and the defeat of the Iranian regime, meaning regime change or regime collapse or state collapse. That's what he's shooting for. And listen, I understand wartime bluster. I mean, that harkens back to things that Churchill said during World War II, we're not going to stop. Unconditional surrenders where we were going. President Trump made that same claim about a week or so ago. Unconditional surrender. Listen, you got to understand, when you say unconditional surrender, and when you say that the destruction of the existing government in its totality and the complete destruction of its ability to have long-range missiles and of at least the allegations of a nuclear program, that is an incredibly expansive and difficult task. That's not something that's easy to do. It's not something you can do with missiles. That should now be very plain and very, very clear. No matter how many missiles Israel has, no matter how many missiles America has, it's never going to be enough to bring the state to its knees, because they have foreseen this. Not just do they have a lot of resources and logistics underground, but they have them spread to the four winds of the country. There's 31 different military districts, and they have them decentralized. So even if you take out one or two here and there, you have to take every single one of them out to get the state. You simply don't have enough bombs. In a country of 93 million people, you just can't kill your way to victory. And I mean, just look at what we did in Japan and in entire cities that never brought them to their knees. We had literal clouds of bombers that would fly over their countries. That's after we had air supremacy, and they could do almost nothing with air defense. And it just carpet bombed the place. It never brought them to their knees. It didn't bring Britain to their knees when the Nazis were doing it in the first part of the war. That's just not what I've told you. North Korea was all but obliterated. North Vietnam was all but obliterated by bombs and missiles. It never brought any of them to their knees. And we're not a fraction of the way here, because we don't have the ordnance. We don't have it in our stockpiles. You could drain every missile in Israel and every missile in American inventory, and you still wouldn't succeed. That's the reality. And that should be a sobering acknowledgement. Just look at history, even recent history, going back maybe 100 years and everything in between. You cannot bomb somebody into submission. Of course, the recent ones, look at Hezbollah. They were decimated. All of their leaders were knocked off, from the top to the generals, everybody just completely obliterated. And yet it set them back for a time, and then they returned. And now here they are still engaging in this war again, less than a year later. You have Hamas in the Palestinian, this tiny little strip of land in the Gaza Strip. They still have not been healed. You have the Houthis, who, by the way, overnight said that if there's an attack on Karg Island, some reports are saying that they're going to shut down the Red Sea Strait down in the south. So that could get worse too. They haven't gone anywhere. So why do you think that a country of 93 million can be bombed into oblivion? It just can't. You're setting yourself up to try and attain a military objective that you don't have the resources or the capability to do. And that even includes the absence of a ground force. Whatever's being talked about with this Karg Island excursion is nothing but a distraction. You're not going to solve anything even if you successfully take that island, and you run the risk of having a catastrophic failure because the enemy is well aware that that's a main target, or any of the other ones. Maybe it's a deception and you're really going to go somewhere else. That wouldn't matter, because you're not going to take a pinpoint. With those few troops, with the 82nd Airborne, the 31st Marine Expeditionary Unit, the 11th Marine Expeditionary Unit, that's not enough in totality to accomplish anything of an operational impact on this war. You can get a lot of people killed. You might even temporarily hold on to something, but it won't make any difference. It won't change the outcome. It won't open the Strait of Hormuz. It won't defeat the Iranian side. It won't destroy their missile capability. It won't destroy whatever's left, wherever these 450 kilogram of reprocessed material, and it's not going to do anything to take away the regime. You see what I'm saying here? You're going up against something that you can't succeed, and you're emphatically saying these are our results here. But also understand the verbal results of this. When you say that when President Trump says this ultimatum, when President Trump says unconditional surrender, when Benjamin Netanyahu says it's the elimination of the government, what you say is this is a literal life and death case for the state of Iran. And when you have your back against the wall and you're threatened with complete destruction and death, the only path you leave for them is escalation, is all out. And that's exactly what we're seeing. And let's just take a look. Here is Professor Morandi trying to explain how the how the Iranians view this. And, he's at the University of Tehran. Obviously, he takes a lot of this personally. Here's how he views it.
Either Trump backs down or Trump carries out his threat. If he carries out his threat, then I think we will strike very hard at these Arab family dictatorships, and that will be the end of. It will be all downhill from then. To open the Strait of Hormuz, it really won't matter anymore, because there won't be any more oil or gas or tankers to move that oil, and therefore the global economic crisis will be permanent for the years to come.
So that's not a good sign here. I mean, you see that he's basically saying we have nothing left to lose. What he described there is basically scorched earth. If President Trump acts on his ultimatum, and that's going to be in Washington, D.C. time tomorrow night, Monday night at 7:44 p.m., because in his Truth Social, he expressly said at this exact moment in 48 hours, so presumably 7:44 p.m. Monday night, that's when the clock expires. And if he makes good on that, then it's clear that the Iranian side is prepared to expand this war in the region to new sets of targets that will be far more catastrophic. One of their spokesmen said last night that they would expand it not just to oil infrastructure and but also to desalination plants, which are absolute more important than oil. Oil is the economic lifeblood. Water is the physical lifeblood. Without that, it's unclear that the populations of some of these countries could even survive. It's unclear if you could ship enough water in there if you lose the desalination plants. Iran showed overnight that they have the ability to hit pinpoint targets, even in the heart of Israel. Now, if you think he's bluffing, if you think the Iranian side is bluffing, that's not a good gamble, because they are demonstrating that they have the capacity to do exactly what Professor Morandi said there. And you, Benjamin Netanyahu, and you, President Trump, have given them all the motivation in the world to do it by leaving them no off-ramps. That's the problem here. That's one of many problems here. And then you see, this is day 23. That strait remains closed today. So I don't know what we're thinking here. It appears that we're not thinking, because we want to say on the one hand that Iran is this weak state and that they're all but defeated, et cetera, but you can't open the Strait of Hormuz. You can't get any of our allies to send ships in, because they realize that's not going to open Strait of Hormuz. It's just going to send their ships to the bottom of the Persian Gulf. No one wants to do that. And now then you're threatened more. What are you going to do? What does President Trump think that if he expands these target sets and hits their energy infrastructure, et cetera, is there anything in Iranian history or mentality or culture that would imply that, anything in human history that would imply that, well, if you hit that target, then they will submit? I mean, there's literally the opposite. And now that you have Iran saying, yeah, you want to do that? We have retaliation capabilities. We have assets that can take care of this. Now, let me show you one other thing, because first of all, diplomacy is basically dead. Here's Foreign Minister Araghchi, who was talking about how he has some real concerns about, so should we do anything more? Is there any room for negotiations right now? This is what he said. I think this was just last night.
We have a very, bitter experience of talking with Americans. We negotiated with them last year in last June, and they attacked us in the middle of negotiations. And again this year, they tried to convince us that this time is different. They promised us that they don't have any intention to attack us. And they wanted to resolve Iran's nuclear question peacefully and to find a negotiated solution. And we finally accepted. But again, after 3 rounds of negotiation, and after the American team in the negotiation, said itself that we made a big progress, still they decided to attack us. So I don't think, talking with Americans anymore would be, on our agenda anymore.
So you see there, and why would they? I mean, with that history he just showed, there's no reason to talk. Well, understand again the consequence of having a situation where no one will trust us and that any negotiations are just used as cover for preparation for military actions means that when you need a negotiated settlement, you don't have a partner, because who would be foolish enough to believe anything that we say? Do you understand what we're doing here? Our actions have put us into this no-win situation. We don't have enough ordnance to bring the country of Iran to its knees by using military force. We would have already done that if we had it. We don't have the military capacity to open the Strait of Hormuz. We would have already done it. The Iranian people have shown through years of war, especially the 8 years of the Iran-Iraq war, they can lose hundreds of thousands of people killed and not break. They can have their infrastructure hit, and they did a lot during that, and not break. They'll find a way to survive. That's all they have to do. And they have the wherewithal and the military capacity for an extended amount of time, many months, possibly even in the years. We don't know for sure how much stuff they have, but we know that they have it right now. And we know that they have the intent to use it. And we have made sure that they are not willing to negotiate it. We've made sure that we're ready to have a scorched earth policy if President Trump makes good on his threat there. And Netanyahu is wrong. Even if he got everybody to join, that's not going to solve the problem. That's just going to mean it's going to expand the war and cause more casualties, and cause potentially this to expand into not just a Middle East regional war, but possibly even the world war that so many fear. Once you start going down a path of expanded violence, it has a tendency to take on a life of its own. And unfortunately, here in the United States, we don't seem to get that. This was on Fox News last night in regard to the ultimatum that the President Trump made. Jason Chaffetz, who's a former congressman, was on the set, and they asked him what he thinks about it. Now, look how serious we take this and how depth of intellectual understanding our senior leaders have.
Yeah, the president doesn't fool around with this. 48 hours, he means it. I'm thinking hour 49, that is going to open up. I think he'll give the oil markets and whatnot come Monday a great deal of relief. But more importantly, the goods and services, and particularly the oil, will start flowing.
Yeah, that's it. You know what? On that 49th hour, President Trump will make good on that. He'll take care of their energy, electricity production facilities, some of their other oil production facilities, and then that'll be it. It'll be problem solved. Doors will be open. Hormuz will be found. They'll drop all their resistance. The price of oil will go back to $60-something a barrel. Life will be good. It is shocking that he seems to believe that. That's what's really troubling. And where is President Trump this morning? So I showed you last night where he was with all of his, let's see if I can find it here. Yeah, with his ultimatum, his 24 hours. Well, this is where he is this morning. This is a little over an hour ago, you see. Now, with the death of Iran, the greatest enemy America has is the radical left, highly incompetent Democratic Party. Thank you for attention. This matter. What matter? This just gives more evidence that President Trump is mentally losing control. What do you mean the death of Iran? You just said there's 48 hours ultimatum, meaning that they're very much in control. The Strait of Hormuz is very much closed. You can't force it open, and they just had these big shots through the teeth of the Iron Dome last night. Ergo, they are most definitely not dead in any capacity. And then you're immediately shifting gears to some kind of domestic issue here, like moving on from this. But that 48 hours is still there. Where does that leave us, folks? With that kind of mentality and leadership in the so-called elite in the United States, with Netanyahu where he is, with Araghchi and therefore the Iranian leadership where they are, with President Trump where he is, everybody is digging in their heels. There is nothing that shows there's any kind of off-ramp coming anytime soon. If anything, this has every possibility of expanding into something much more ugly and dark and dangerous and destructive. If former Representative Chaffetz thinks that this ultimatum is going to get the strait opened up back, sometimes Tuesday morning after this 48 hours expires Monday night, probably the opposite is going to happen. If President Trump makes good on his threat and actually attacks the energy infrastructure of Iran, you can be sure that they already have their missiles programmed, and they'll probably will retaliate in kind probably immediately and take it to others. And you will see oil skyrocket. It'll go way over $100 a barrel. This can get ugly. This could be a very, very pivotal week. And everything hinges on whether President Trump's going to do what he's going to do or not. And that we of course, President Trump said Iran is dead. The only thing that's dead right now is diplomacy. We have shut it off because of our actions. And this is when we need it desperately. We need it now more than we ever have. And unfortunately, instead of moving in the direction of diplomacy, it looks like we're about to move in the direction of escalation. And this could take off in directions I can't even predict. So I won't try to, other than to say that it's going to be bad for the region. It's going to be bad for America. It's going to be bad for Israel. It's going to be bad for Iran. It's going to be bad for the global economy. This is going to be bad for everybody, and everyone's going to have to react to this. I'm uncertain where this is going to go, but it is a very, very dangerous period of time here. We will keep a close eye on this and certainly bring you up any breaking news that happens in between now and Monday morning. Otherwise, we'll be back.
Trump finna ruin them Arabs. They threw mark my word, the king of Saudi. We living in a lifetime. We're gonna see the kings hung. Them people gonna kill them. People gonna kill all of them. Ain't gonna be no royal families after this. That's a fact. Iran gonna put an end to royal dictatorships in the Middle East.
The flailing Truth Social, Trump's own social media platform, which is losing hundreds of millions of dollars a year, which is one straw in the wind, but there are many of the sinking of the once flagship MAGA. He is daily, actually hourly, entirely contradicting himself as this war enters the fourth week with the costs astronomical to the U.S. taxpayer, but even more astronomical to the U.S. consumer, to the consumer of petrol and diesel and oil all over the Western world. Indeed, all over the world. The financial and economic catastrophe I'll come to in a minute. But I want to concentrate just for a few minutes on what I call the madness of Donald Trump. And I mean literal madness of Donald Trump, the cognitive degeneration of a man elected with such pomp for a second presidential term only a little over a year ago. He told everyone on Truth Social, but then the world, that the United States did not need to open the Straits of Hormuz, didn't use the Strait of Hormuz, and it should be liberated and cleared as if it could be by those who do depend on it, amongst whom he included China. But China has no problem at all exiting its oil through the Strait of Hormuz. Indeed, Iran is now allowing through tankers only that were purchased in the Chinese currency, the RMB, the yuan. The other countries that he mentioned are countries quite incapable of clearing the Strait of Hormuz, whatever that means. But he said they had to send their navies in order to achieve it. And then the next day, this day, he makes an explicit threat of a war crime if by tomorrow the Strait of Hormuz is not entirely open for business. He said if it is not open without threat by tomorrow's date, then he will unleash the mother of all blizzards of high explosive to destroy Iran's power apparatus, its infrastructure, its electricity. It will switch off every light, every incubator, every piece of electricity in Iran, which is a clearly defined war crime since the Nuremberg tribunals, indeed since the Geneva Conventions, which America signed almost 90 years ago. In any sane country, the Congress would immediately have drawn to his attention that this would be a clear war crime, but they do not in the United States. Now, if he does it, Iran has been perfectly clear. In fact, they've been perfectly clear and truthful throughout this conflict and the run-up to this.
The Israeli government, they crying on TV today as their cities is devastated, saying Iran is committing war crimes. They're targeting civilians. Never in history has anybody ever seen this happen to Israel. They're crying. They're saying Iran is targeting civilians, and everybody's saying your cities look like Gaza. You need more of that.
This conflict, not least on our show with Professor Marandi, who's coming up next.
Why Trump is a madman, threatening to destroy their power grids. They just came out and say, bro, just you don't even got to warn us. Just do whatever the hell you're going to do. And all of your Arab puppets in Israel and all of your assets, I just seen a message from a parliamentarian in Iran today, released a message saying anywhere the U.S. government officials go to, if they go to a park, if they go anywhere, to here into eternity, their ass can get hit. They want to play stupid, now they in an all-out war. Any assets, anything that got anything to do with the U.S., any business ties to the U.S. and the military, ass can be grasped. That's a McDonald's. I'm telling you, this they getting us into serious shit. And I keep telling you, I'm warning them, don't be hitting restaurants. Don't hit daycares, because they open themselves up for Iran to retaliate the same damn way. They don't want to do it.
To this monologue, they've been perfectly clear what they will do if their electricity is destroyed, their power is decimated, as per Donald Trump's explicit statement on Truth Social, and the deadline is tomorrow. So if you don't know it, let me tell you it, especially to those living, working in the Persian Gulf, in the Arab countries that surround Iran. If this happens, said Iran, every single local neighbor of theirs will have all of their...
And I know that nobody in the world think Iran bluffing no boat. Everybody knows that when the Iran got some major respect. Everybody knows that when the Iranians say something, they mean it now, God damn it. And they warning the crazy king in the White House. If you attack our power stations, we're going to be good. But the fucking Arabs in Israel and all your military people in the Middle East, they're not going to be good. They ass going back to the Stone Ages. They're going to be living in the dark. The Arabs, we will hit those distillation plants where how they get their water. They said they're going to hit that. So they're going back to living. They're going back to riding camels. All right? Ain't they don't need no Lamborghini because they don't have no gas. They going back to bathing in the river in a minute. That's a fact.
Infrastructure irrevocably destroyed for all time. That means not just their electricity generation, it means their desalination. And their desalination plants, which are minuscule by importance in Iran, but gigantic in importance in the Arab countries of the Gulf, which are hosting the American bases and which are allowing, despite what they say, American attacks on Iran to take place literally from their land in some cases, in every other case, using their air and their water. If this destruction of desalination occurs, then 1 million or more people will die, and very, very quickly. How so?
They can thank
well,
Trump.
Kuwait depends on its desalination plants for drinking water to the extent of 93%. 93% of Kuwait's drinking water is seawater desalinated and turned into drinking water. If that happens, no one will be able to live in Kuwait. The poor in Kuwait will die. The rich will race to somewhere that they can actually get a bit of water with their whiskey. The desalination dependence in Qatar, in Saudi Arabia, is, though not quite as big, genuinely massive. It's at least 50% in Saudi Arabia. It's more than 50% in Qatar. And it is well, pretty near 100% in Bahrain, about which more in a minute. So if Donald Trump does this, he's going to cause a catastrophic wave of civilian deaths in the countries that have given him so many diamonds and pearls, that have given him so many $400 million.
Yeah, but now we know what that wasn't because Trump is just corrupt and they want to butter him up. No, that was a $200 billion hit on Iran. I knew it then. I said that in a live when Trump was over there dancing with the Arabs and they just cut this big deal. I say, boy, they look like they putting a hit on Iran to me. That's what it looked. I said that it looked like it was hit money. Now we found out it was hit money. Saudi Arabia, Qatar, UAE, they were all behind the scenes pushing Trump to destroy Iran. Right before the war started, a report leaked that Saudi Arabia was telling Trump, well, he's come this far. They don't want to start a war, but if he doesn't do anything, Iran would be extremely more powerful. They didn't even understand, nigga. Iran now is going to rule the Middle East. They're finished. The U.S. is finished, and Israel is finished. Historically, the people are going to see this. It happened in this time that we're living in, and the Arabs played themselves and paid for their destruction. They pay for this, and militarily, there's nothing they can do. They want Pakistan or Turkey to protect them, but Iran in a bloodthirst mode. Turkey can't defeat Iran. Pakistan can't defeat Iran. Who gives a fuck? They got nukes. Iran is on. They wouldn't be nuclear if you try that shit with them. No. If you want to play with Iran, you got to be willing to die right now.
Private aircraft, 747s, to buy protection. At least the Genovese family in the city of New York do actually provide the protection that they extort your money for, but not Donald Trump. So there will be no light, there will be no computer, there will be no television, there will be no television transmission. There will be nothing that is electrical that works, either in Iran or in any of the surrounding countries. There will be a flood of refugees. Hey, right-wingers supporting this war, a flood of refugees. Some of them will be glittering nobility. Some of them will be oligarchs of one kind or another. But 70% of the population of Dubai are Indians. They're living not that well in Dubai, but they won't be once the lights and the desalination is switched off. Where will they go? Back to India, or will they head your way? So the consequences of Donald Trump's threat, if carried out, are so dire that even the puppet regimes in the Gulf have begged him not to do it for obvious reasons. But do you trust Donald Trump not to do it? I certainly do not. He's also threatening, having ruled it out, he's ruled it in again, to put American boots on the ground. Our poll is on that very subject this evening.
Iran sent 2 messages to one of our armored divisions and one of our airborne divisions. I think China leaked them. They directly military to military, Iran sent messages to them, begging them to stop talking about it and send those fucking Marines to that island, telling those soldiers they ain't got to run to the news, man up and come fight us. All that Trump and man, them people don't give a damn about you talking about sending no troops. That's what they want you to do. They want Trump
now,
to do that.
He might be bluffing. It's very difficult to see, given what happened to the U.S. Navy ships who were sabotaged deliberately by their own sailors, with the toilets first malfunctioning and then a suspicious fire in the laundry room. Though I've just seen the damage done by that suspicious fire in the laundry room, and it looked like the aftermath of the Great Fire of London. Must have been one hell of a laundry room. Must have been one hell of a laundry room fire. Truth is, of course, it was holed by American missile strikes, and the American government lied about it, like they've been lying ever since this war began. And the American media allowed them to lie. The American media perpetrated the lie. They spread it. They're trying to manufacture consent in the United States for Trump's disastrous war, but they are lamentably failing. But given that the sailors did set a laundry room fire, given that the sailors did deliberately clog their toilets with their T-shirts, their socks, and their pants, it was, of course, a debatable point that even the 82nd Airborne Division, even the U.S. Marine Corps, are not exactly the kind of patsies that are prepared to go to a predetermined doom, so that Donald Trump's ratings might, just might, get a demonstrable bounce. Into the valley of death they rode. Into the valley of death rode the gallant 600. That's the charge of the Light Brigade. And that's the new charge of the Light Brigade that Donald Trump is now threatening. If he occupies Karg Island will disappear under the sea, and everyone standing on it with it. If anyone thinks Iran will not destroy their oil facilities on Karg Island, they have failed to grasp that for Iran, this is an existential conflict. It's not about economics. It's not about how they'll survive in the future, having destroyed their own oil. It's about whether their country will continue to exist. The plans are clear and obvious: to break Iran up into ethnic and religious fiefdoms that maybe fight each other, and we could sell weapons to both sides. But in any case, they won't be much of a threat to Israel, who are, of course, the primary reason why this conflict is occurring. So for Iran, it's to be or not to be. And in those circumstances, whoever lands with their boots on the ground on any part of Iranian territory will be quickly eviscerated. If anyone doubts that, they are not watching the videos on social media of the pounding that Israel is taking, not just every night, although that's pretty spectacular, but now every day as well. They now know that the state of Israel has no defense to the blizzard of hypersonic, ballistic, and other ordnance that is being fired now 24 hours a day from launchers that no longer exist, according to Donald Trump, missiles that no longer exist. Iran now has air superiority over the skies of Israel. Only a fool can deny that. When they can fire a missile into the Israeli nuclear weapons plant at Dimona in the Negev, yeah, they're finally admitting in the Western media that actually Israel has nuclear weapons. Strategic ambiguity is no more. If Iran can hit Dimona, they can definitely hit Karg Island, which is only a few miles off their own coast. And they won't even have to use ballistic missiles. It's so close. They have 80,000 drones ready to go. And those drones, which have changed the entire course of warfare in world history, will be raining down on the 82nd Airborne, and they'll be raining down on the U.S. Marine Corps. And there is absolutely nothing that the United States is able to do.
Nothing they're going to be able to do for it. They need to get this through their fucking mind. They will never put boots on the ground anywhere near Iran or capture ground near Iran, like the island. Iran is just going to drone strike them people to death. The U.S. don't even know what they finding out what they facing, but they just coming on TV and talking shit, threatening these people to send troops. It's just you digging your own grave.
If they were able to, they wouldn't be suffering the humiliation that they have now suffered in Iraq, in Bahrain, in Qatar. They have withdrawn, they have evacuated all of their military personnel from the Arabian side of the Gulf. But yesterday was the most humiliating moment of them all. They begged the Iraqi resistance for 24-hour ceasefire so that they could withdraw all remaining American forces from Iraq, which have occupied Iraq ever since the end of the war in 2003. The Iraq War, of course, was just a stepping stone for what is set to become a very much bigger and much more portentous conflict than the one George Bush entered into in 2003, just around this time of the year. They begged the resistance to allow them to retreat without being under fire. And they've now moved every one of the American forces out of Iraq and into Turkey. The resistance wisely, I think, gave them their 24-hour ceasefire. It's humiliating enough. NATO has withdrawn its troops from Iraq. Who knew NATO had troops in Iraq? The North Atlantic Treaty Organization had troops in Iraq, which they have now withdrawn. Poland. Who knew Poland had troops in Iraq? What were they doing there? But they've withdrawn too. In fact, all Western forces have now withdrawn from Iraq, and Iraq is now a free country. And I very much doubt whether they will allow any of these troops, any of these bases to be reconstituted. There are many of these collaborator regimes that I could name, but I don't want to inflame the situation. It's not really my job, but I mention only one because it has a knock-on effect. Saudi Arabia just paid Jordan to send thousands of anti-riot troops. They have to have thousands of anti-riot troops in Jordan, because if they didn't, the regime in Jordan would no longer exist. They've sent thousands of Jordanian troops. Where? Into the West Bank, which is burning, where there's a pogrom this night and last night.
That's a fact.
Into the West Bank, where armed Israeli settlers are on a coked up rampage, ethnically cleansing the West Bank, which is legally occupied territory according to the World Court. It is the responsibility of the international community.
And that's another thing. That's why it don't look good for the world, because these imposters who are out of their mind, they got nuclear weapons, they crazy, they control the U.S., our military, they control our government, they control our finances. While they getting their ass kicked and the U.S. getting their ass kicked, these people just steady talking about taking land, and they're doing it in Palestine, trying to take land in Lebanon. Like, bro, you're not finna keep no land. You might lose all of your land. What is this about? It's about causing confusion, sowing chaos, and what some of them radicals are saying, bringing about the Messiah. They want the destruction of every fucking thing, bro.
Community to protect it according to the World Court. No, the Jordanian troops were needed farther away than West Bank, which is where most of them incidentally come from. Most of the people in Jordan are Palestinians, and those that are in the anti-riot troops are almost certainly a majority Palestinian population. But they're not going into the West Bank. They're not going in to protect their fellow countrymen. They're not going in to protect their own people, the villages and towns from which their own parents or grandparents were driven in 1967 by the Israeli occupation of the territory. No, where have they been sent? Saudi Arabia has paid Jordan to send them to Bahrain. Why? Because if they're not there, the government of Bahrain will be overthrown. Now, whether there'll be enough Jordanian forces to stop that, or whether the Jordanian forces can necessarily be counted on to fire on the people of Bahrain, who by overwhelming majority, 80%, reject completely the illegitimate, tyrannical rule of the Emir of Bahrain. Maybe the Emir will end up on the causeway. He may have to leave his gin and tonics behind. He may have to leave his concubines behind, although not necessarily so, and flee to Saudi Arabia. The people of Bahrain have been tortured, literally, for decades. I became involved in Gulf politics when I made a major speech in Parliament in a debate that I instituted to denounce the role of a Scotsman called Ian Henderson, who was the Bahraini regime's chief torturer. He'd made his name as a torturer in Kenya with the Mau Mau, torturing Kenyans. And when he retired, the Bahrainis hired him to be their chief torturer. And I brought this to the notice of the British Parliament and some of the British public. So I've had an interest in Bahrain, and my interest is helping the Bahraini people free themselves from foreign occupation, free themselves from unrepresentative tyranny. Now, I quoted the charge of the Light Brigade a few minutes ago. So let me close with another quotation from that same point. Theirs is not to reason why. Theirs is but to do and die. That's what will happen to any troops that Donald Trump sends into this conflagration. This war will not be stopped by Donald Trump. Whatever he says from 1 hour to the next, this war now depends on Iran. Iran has achieved the military political advantage in this war. Whatever the American media tries to spin, whatever the Israel lobby in the United States tries to persuade you, the truth is it's advantage Iran. And I've got a guest coming up who'll tell us if they indeed intend to press home that advantage. Professor Morandi, up next after this very, very short break. Stay tuned.
الله الرحمن الرحیم. جنایتکاران جنگی آمریکا و رژیم صهیونیستی با وحشیگری دنیا را به جنگلی بیقانون تبدیل کردند. البته خوی حیوانی از برخی عادات ضد بشری این جانیان انسان نما بالاتر است. فقط از اینها برمی آید که مردان، زنان و کودکان بیگناه را به خاک و خون بکشند و بناهای فرهنگی تاریخی را تخریب کنند و ادعا کنند مدافع مردم هستند، که از این کودک‌کش‌های کودکخوار تعجبی ندارد. شما با حافظه تاریخی مردم نمیتوانید بجنگید. حافظه‌ای که فقط و فقط شکست شما را از ابتدای پیروزی انقلاب اسلامی تا به امروز به یاد دارد. در این نبرد پیروزی با کسی است که ترس به دلش راه نداشته باشد. رزمندگان شجاع‌دل با غیرت و فرزندان عاشورایی فقط به پیروزی فکر می‌کنند و جز خداوند متعال از هیچ کس و هیچ چیز واهمه ندارند. این ضربات کوبنده و مقتدرانه ادامه خواهد داشت و من نصر الا من عند الله العزیز الحکیم.
So this was the statement of the spokesperson of the Khatam al-Anbiya HQ in relation to the recent developments as Iran is carrying out the 74th wave of attacks. Now, Iran declared that it targeted multiple locations in this wave of attacks. They said that they targeted both American and Israeli targets. As we can see from the video that was posted by Iran, they used heavy missiles again, some of them weighing 2 tons with a 2-ton warhead. And the statement of Iran said that they conducted the 74th wave of True Promise 4. And according to the statement, they targeted American military bases alongside southern areas and sites in them in the southern occupied Palestine location, using what they described as pre-planned scenarios involving new tactics and upgraded systems. The statement said that the United States Prince Sultan Air Base in Saudi Arabia, the Fifth Fleet in Bahrain, and a base used by the Kurdish Komala militias were struck in rapid missile attacks. These strikes involved the Imad, Fateh, and Qiyam ballistic missiles, as well as attack drones, forming part of a series of operations carried out in recent days. They continued in relation to their attacks on Israel, saying that they targeted military bases and security centers in Tel Aviv, Petah Tikva, Holon, and Ramat Gan. They were hit and destroyed on Saturday. The statement said that the strikes were carried out with heavy missiles, including the Qadr, Khaybar Shekan, and Khorram Shahr 4 missiles. Now, with these declarations coming from Iran, American and Israeli decision makers are getting frustrated as this war is continuing, and we're seeing a lot of conflicting reports and statements, including from the American president himself. The US weapon support systems were not really working as they expected. Iran destroyed most of them. More statements coming about anger and frustration amongst US and Israeli decision makers, reiterating warnings from previous officials about the outcomes of these attacks of Iran or against Iran and what Iran can do to these countries. They clearly weren't expecting this level of devastation coming from the Iranian side, but with all of the developments now, we can see clearly that they were mistaken. And this again proves that this war of aggression against Iran hasn't been thought out properly. They didn't think things carefully, and clearly we saw a case here where the American president was literally following demands from the Israeli side to go and conduct this war. Now they're stuck, they don't know exactly what to do, and things are heating up. We've had more warnings from Israel and the United States that they're planning to expand this operation even further. And the recent statement that came in that regard was from Donald Trump, which we will be speaking about again. But before we get into these statements, Iran also declared that it targeted an F-35 in Iran today. We're seeing an increase in Iranian reports that they're targeting Israeli and American fighter jets in the region. Clearly, after that attack on the F-35, Iran hacked something to do with the Air Force of Israel and the United States. Now, the F-35, that's the first time it has been hit. Neither Iran nor the US confirmed if it was completely destroyed. The United States, as a matter of fact, said that it landed safely. Iran said that they couldn't confirm if it was destroyed, but it was hit, and they published the video of it. And they targeted it from their own multi-layer or unified air defense system, indicating that it's Iranian-made air defenses. They clearly studied the patterns. And once they had this hack with the F-35, the F-15s and the F-16s are becoming more vulnerable. So we can start to see a situation where Iran would be taking down even more fighter jets, and Israel and the United States would be struggling with their air force because that is their strategic weapon. Whereas Iran, it has the missiles and drones as its strategic weapon. However, if Iran manages to get to a level where through its internal unified air defense systems or any other systems that it uses under the umbrella of air defense, if it manages to reach a high level of confrontation and higher success rates, as we have been seeing for the past couple of days, this would be a game changer in everything. Now, mind you, some people are talking about attempts of de-escalation, but so far things are going ahead, and the United States and Israel are paying a very, very heavy price. Now, in relation to these conflicting statements, Donald Trump had a statement where he gave Iran literally 24 hours to open the Strait of Hormuz. Otherwise, what is Donald Trump going to do exactly? Is there something else that he can do that he hasn't done so far? Let's look at what he said. If Iran doesn't fully open without threat the Strait of Hormuz within 48 hours from this exact point in time, which is last evening basically, the United States of America will hit and obliterate their various power plants, starting with the biggest one first. Thank you for your attention to this matter, President Donald J. Trump. Is the American president serious about this threat, or is he trying to escalate things further to try and have leverage on Iran? What is the situation going to be like here? Firstly, let's understand the level of threat. It's a very serious threat. However, Iran has a very complicated and advanced power grid and gas network system. Some observers are saying that it's nearly impossible to destroy. Why? Because they don't have just an energy infrastructure. They have one of the most advanced power and gas networks on the planet. We're talking about lines that are spread out between multiple parts of the country, and they have multiple locations that cannot be hit with traditional missiles or any of the missiles that the United States has, but there are visible, of course, power grids or some of these power plants that the United States can hit and cause damage to. But the chances are none of the attacks would be likely to cause total blackout inside of Iran, simply by how they have the system managed and spread out across Iran. Here you can see the map of the high voltage grid in Iran and their systems internally, and the gas supply system. So in many ways, their infrastructure to do with power and energy is very robust, very thorough, and it's very difficult for the United States to target. There are, of course, technicalities to the issue which are not too relevant to the matter, but the point is they are very secure, and they secured it in a way to prepare themselves for this moment, like they secured their missile systems, like they secured their strategic weapons, their uranium. They know very well that they would be vulnerable to these attacks. That doesn't mean, however, that Iran would view any such attack on any of its strategic infrastructure as not serious, but the contrary. As a matter of fact, we've had a statement immediately following the threats of Donald Trump. The Iranian state media outlet Mehr News Agency published a poster titled "Goodbye to Electricity," depicting power plants all across the Gulf. And they said, in the event of even the slightest attack on Iran's electricity infrastructure, the entire region will go dark. This is the poster that they posted, and they said what they're going to be attacking. They did not mention, but don't think that they would be excluded, Israel in this, because they consider the attack on Iran to be an American-Israeli attack. As a matter of fact, this leads us to more confusion and battles internally between this supposedly strong alliance between the United States and Israel, which is not actually. We're talking about one side blackmailing the other now and using their influence with their money and buying politicians in the United States. There's an argument now, if you observe the couple of things that happened in the past few days. Israel targeted the South Pars gas field. That was supposedly without notifying the United States. As a matter of fact, Donald Trump later on asked Israel not to do that. Israel said, we will listen to Donald Trump. However, the damage was already done. Multiple American assets were already hit and destroyed. What does that mean? That means that the United States paid a price, a very heavy one, for an act that Israel has done. What happened later? The United States targeted the security position in Natanz. Now, the only retaliation against a nuclear plant or a nuclear hub or a bunker, anything that relates to the nuclear program, would be Israel. Therefore, Israel this time paid for an American attack. Are they playing tit for tat, Israel and the United States? Is the United States punishing Israel for that move without their consent? And again, of course, everything could be coordinated, but I'm talking to you about these reports that we got recently, which indicates that these countries are not really on par with each other's objectives here. Clearly, the United States is dragged into a war that it doesn't really want. And despite all of the resistance from the American people, the American president went ahead with that war of aggression against Iran. Now, in relation to the attack on Dimona,
get tax expertise without hidden fees. Switch to a TurboTax expert.
There were multiple locations targeted in Iran's recent attack on Dimona. One of them was the Research and Technology Building, several of them. They were targeted with high precision missiles, as we saw in the destruction that took place following this attack. Again, they were planted between civilians, of course. That's what they do. Like with the Kiryat, the hub of Israel, it's surrounded by civilians. So when they claim, of course, that it's the other side doing that when they were the ones doing it. And the levels of destruction that were also published today showed significant devastation in Dimona. And we can clearly see here these buildings being slightly different than the buildings surrounding them. But after all, they were completely destroyed. And this was described as one of the biggest attacks of Iran against Israel, with one of the biggest number of casualties. Why was it such a big number of casualties? Because of the level of missiles, their intensity, and their warheads that landed. And Iran actually, in that attack against Dimona, it had a message for Israel. Firstly, let's have a look at the wave that targeted Dimona. What type of missiles were used to target Dimona? And we'll go through the messages that Iran wanted to send. Firstly, they used a couple of missiles in this attack, according to some of the reports that came about this attack. They used the Qadr and Fatih missiles, according to some of the reports that came, which are some of Iran's, of course, heavy missiles with lethal warheads, hypersonic speeds that both Israel and the United States cannot really intercept. So they targeted them with those missiles, and they landed heavily. They targeted Arad, Dimona, Eilat, Beersheva, and Kiryat Gat, and the same wave targeted Ali Salim base in Kuwait, Al-Minhad air base near Dubai, and Al-Dhafra air base in Abu Dhabi. And they confirmed again with the statement that Fattah and Qadr and Imad missiles were used. Let's have a look at the video that Iran published. So this was the attack that Iran published, Wave 73. What did they show here? Okay, they showed this image in the beginning of the video with a Quranic verse that says, "Inna min al-mujrimina muntaqimun." We will surely inflict punishment upon the wicked. That's the first verse. The second verse here at the bottom says, "Inna al-batila kana zahuqa." Indeed, falsehood is bound to vanish. They deliberately put that message in a way to tell Israel that you will be punished and truth has arrived for you because of your wicked actions against us and against our people. And again, that so far was one of Iran's most lethal attacks. Initial reports in Israel said that 7 were killed. Later, they started to say that there was no one killed. There was only people who were actually wounded in that attack. However, based on the initial reports, we can clearly see, and today more videos and images were published about the scale of the destruction. I mean, look at how many buildings were completely destroyed only from one missile in, again, an attack on what was described a hub to do with research about the nuclear program. The Iranian side previously completely destroyed the Weizmann Institute, Israel's most prestigious, most important institute. It had nuclear science, it had advanced research, and that was obliterated with one missile again. And they sent Israel a message here. And the most important thing out of all of this attack is, by the way, the reports that it was the United States that targeted the security section of the Natanz nuclear plant, which in a way could be revenge coming from the United States against Israel, because they surely know that Iran will be retaliating. What would be conclude from all of these developments that are happening? Firstly, if we want to take it from the American side, there are many conflicting statements coming from the American administration, first and foremost by Donald Trump, and then by his Secretary of War. And these contradictions come in the form of the objectives of the war, what has been achieved so far, what they're going to do afterwards, and the blatant and public rows that they have with their supposed allies.
I was driving one night and I hit a guy who was walking across the street.
When you're behind the wheel, slow down, stop for people in crosswalks, and pass bikes at a safe distance. Because what happens in an instant can stay with you for life.
They are clearly unable to ensure that the Hormuz Strait is open with their own force, which is a massive blow to their image and reputation. They don't have any country that wants to participate. It led them to ask for China to help, which means that the United States isn't capable of ensuring the flow of goods from the Strait of Hormuz during the time of war. So that's number one. Then the fact that they're saying that they obliterated Iran's army and Iran's capabilities, yet after all of these statements, we see Iran only getting or giving them a harsher attacks with more advanced missiles and more numbers of casualties and more destruction. All of that completely debunks all of the statements that are coming from Donald Trump and Pete Hegseth. This is from the American side. From the Israeli side, they're also in a lot of contradiction. There are no clear, visible objectives of the war. We don't know the exact number. They haven't made it official whatsoever. Wishy-washy stuff, we're reducing the missile capabilities, reducing the nuclear threat, and the list goes on, and maybe, take down the regime or what have you, as they say. Delusions, wishful thinking, contradictions, because they were overwhelmed by the Iranian response. But what's for sure is, from the Iranian side, we see a lot of clarity. We see a lot of clarity with the attacks of Iran, decisive measures to punish their enemies, to punish the Epstein regime and the genocide state, a continuation and escalation. And every time they have certain statements, their actions on the ground are completely in line with those statements. We don't see contradictions from the Iranian side in relation to the war and the progress of the war, verified by facts on the ground that, despite the fact many sides are trying to hide, are eventually very visible and reveal a completely different story to the American and Israeli administration's narrative about this war. Right now, misinformation spread.
Well, my dear truth seekers, watching the current armed conflict in the Middle East, it became clear that Henry Kissinger was right when he said that to be an enemy of America can be dangerous, but to be a friend is fatal. Indeed, Bahrain, Kuwait, Oman, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and the United Arab Emirates are suffering the most as a result of Iran's retaliatory action against the US-Israeli aggression. All these Arab countries are not only allies of the United States, but also close friends of Washington. At one time, these Gulf states believed the promises of the United States, that the presence of the U.S. military bases on their territory would ensure security in the region. However, as time has shown, the United States needed these military bases to unleash and wage another large-scale war in the Middle East. Washington is currently using the territory of the United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Oman, Kuwait, and Bahrain to carry out attacks on Iran. At the same time, the U.S. authorities absolutely do not give a damn that these friends of the United States are suffering heavy losses due to Iran's retaliatory actions. However, the insidiousness of the U.S. authorities does not end there. As it turned out, Donald Trump, being not only the President of the United States, but also a businessman, decided to make extra money on the problems of his Arab allies. So, a few hours ago, the Omani journalist Salem bin Hamad al-Jahuri made a rather shocking statement. In particular, speaking live on BBC Arabic, he bluntly stated that the Trump administration is currently putting a lot of pressure on U.S. allies, such as the United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Oman, Kuwait, and Bahrain. According to him, Donald Trump even issued an ultimatum to the authorities of these Arab countries. The current occupant of the White House demands $5 trillion from these Arab countries in order for the United States to continue the war until complete victory over Iran. At the same time, Donald Trump also made it clear that if the Gulf states pay him $2.5 trillion, he will immediately order the U.S. withdrawal from this war, and the withdrawal of all American troops from the region. According to an Omani journalist, this financial blackmail by Donald Trump has no analogues in the history of U.S. relations with Arab countries. My dear truth seekers, it is worth noting that the White House has not yet officially confirmed the existence of such an ultimatum from the President of the United States. However, knowing Donald Trump's passion for all kinds of deals and the desire to make big money, this statement by the Omani journalist may be the real truth. Meanwhile, Tehran continues to prove to the world that all the statements by Donald Trump and Pete Hegseth that Iran has completely lost all its missile stocks do not correspond to the truth. Military experts have noted that over the past 48 hours, Iran has attacked Israeli and U.S. forces in the region 3 times, using previously unknown ballistic missiles with the so-called maneuverable re-entry vehicle. For example, this video from Tel Aviv shows how the warhead of an Iranian missile begins to actively maneuver, in order to confuse the algorithms of the Israeli air defense. As a result, Iranian missiles manage to hit targets even in the most heavily defended areas of Israel. It is noteworthy that American analytical centers also recognize the power and effectiveness of the latest Iranian ballistic missiles. In particular, Western military experts were impressed by the result of the launches of the latest Iranian Nasrallah missiles at Israeli oil refineries in cities such as Ashdod and Haifa. As it turned out, all the warheads of these latest ballistic missiles successfully hit their targets.
Slice so good, hit like boom. Papa John's, fill the room.
However, the unpleasant surprises for Israel and the United States did not end there. On the night of March 21st, 2 Iranian ballistic missiles attacked a military base of British and American forces on Diego Garcia Island, in the Indian Ocean. Even though one of the Iranian missiles fell into the ocean and the other one was shot down by the air defense system of one of the American warships, this incident caused alarm in the Pentagon. The fact is that the distance from southern Iran to Diego Garcia Island is nearly 4,000 kilometers. Thus, Tehran demonstrated that the IRGC has missiles in its arsenal that can hit military bases in many NATO countries, including Poland, Germany, Romania, Italy, France, and even Britain. Against this backdrop, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization already called for an urgent meeting. It is also worth noting another attack by Iranian missiles on the U.S. Air Base Victoria, in the Iraqi capital of Baghdad. It is noteworthy that Iran attacked this airbase precisely at the moment when a military transport plane with a group of U.S. Special Forces on board arrived there. Unfortunately, at the moment, there is no accurate information about the presence of casualties among the American servicemen. However, witnesses claim a severe fire at this airbase, and a large number of ambulances that ply from a military facility to hospitals in the Iraqi capital. By the way, an hour earlier, Iran also hit the largest IDF military logistics base in central Israel. Meanwhile, the Iranian military department officially announced that the country's air defense systems shot down an Israeli F-16 over the central part of Iran. At the same time, it is worth emphasizing that it was a 2-seat Israeli Air Force fighter jet, F-16D Barak. According to the Iranian military, 2 Israeli pilots were killed instantly. Furthermore, the Iranian Defense Ministry also confirmed that it was the third Israeli fighter jet to be destroyed over the central part of Iran in the last 48 hours. The official report says that in 22 days of fighting, the Iranian air defense destroyed 200 enemy aerial targets, including fighter jets, tanker planes, cruise missiles, and unmanned aerial vehicles. Well, my dear truth seekers, the fact that Iran has begun shooting down American and Israeli fighter jets over its territory indicates that Tehran's enemies are nervous amid increased resistance from the IRGC. And this nervousness compels Israel and the United States to undertake risks and commit serious errors.
The silence coming out of Tel Aviv and Washington right now is deafening. Last night, viral satellite images and corroborated reports from the ground are confirming what Iranian state media and military spokespersons have declared. The 72nd wave of Iran's Operation Truthful Promise has successfully penetrated deep into Israeli territory, striking the very heart of its nuclear ambitions. We are talking about a precise, devastating hit on the Dimona nuclear research facility.
In Israel, we're learning more than 100 people have been wounded in an Iranian missile attack on the southern city of Dimona, that is home to Israel's main nuclear facility.
Iran launched a missile strike on southern Israel on Saturday night, hitting the towns of Dimona.
Iran launched missile strikes on southern Israel on Saturday, wounding at least 180 people in the cities of Dimona and Arad.
But this wasn't just a strike on a building, this was a targeted assassination operation of the highest order. According to intelligence gathered and now circulating on Iranian news platforms like Press TV and Al Mayadeen, Iranian military intelligence tracked a secret gathering of Israeli nuclear scientists, scheduled for a meeting inside the nuclear research complex in Dimona. When the missile struck, it didn't just hit a random structure. It reportedly obliterated the meeting point, causing dozens of casualties in what is being described.
And that's why Israel, that's all they're talking about is this devastating missile strike yesterday. And I reported that through some of my military sources or different websites I'll be reading. I said my live at the beginning yesterday, before this guy reported to this, that I heard Israeli nuclear scientists were killed in their bunker. Because when Iran shot the first wave of missiles, that had them run to the bunker. Then Iran targeted the bunker. That was the plan the whole time. See, Iran tit for tat. You killing our scientists, now we're finna kill all of your nuclear scientists.
In the region as
they don't
the largest
report that, but if you look at their reaction, they tell you hundreds of people injured. They don't tell you who those people did, but they're not telling you who was killed. Who's killed? They act like nobody. Yeah, right.
Most brazen retaliation for the decades-long shadow war Israel waged inside the Islamic Republic. Let's be very clear about what we are witnessing here. This is not a random escalation. This is Iran shifting from a defensive posture to an offensive doctrine, and they are doing so with a level of sophistication that has left Israeli military planners scrambling. The Israeli military itself has been forced to admit the unthinkable. Their defenses failed. Reports from the ground in Dimona and the neighboring town of Arad describe scenes of utter chaos. In Dimona, a missile directly collapsed a building. In Arad, social media footage and emergency services confirm that residential areas were hit with such force that dozens of homes were leveled, with the number of injured now surpassing 100 and counting, as I have reported in my previous update. The Israeli Air Force is currently conducting internal investigations, as leaked to Israeli media, asking the one question that keeps their generals up at night. How? How did an Iranian missile travel hundreds of miles, cross into Israeli airspace, and slam into the most sensitive nuclear site in the country without being intercepted? The answer, and this is where the story gets terrifying for Tel Aviv, points to a catastrophic intelligence failure that suggests Iranian operatives have achieved a level of deep infiltration that Israel thought was impossible. Before we dive deeper into the strategic implications of this decapitation strike inside the Dimona facility, I want to pause for a moment. If you are watching this and you value journalism that dares to tell the truth about the hypocrisy of Western foreign policy and the strength of the resistance axis, I need you to engage with this video. Hit that like button, not just for me, but to push back against the algorithmic suppression that tries to bury content like this. Drop a comment, even if it's just a dot, a period, or the phrase Dimona was defenseless. Let them know we are watching. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to this channel. We are one of the last bastions of honest, unfiltered journalism, and your subscription ensures we can keep bringing you these deep dives without bowing to the pressure of mainstream narratives. Do it now, and let's get back to the story. Now, let's talk about the sheer ingenuity of this attack, because what happened in Dimona is not just a military strike. It is a masterclass in psychological warfare and intelligence gathering, mirroring the very playbook that the Israeli occupation government has used for decades against its neighbors. For years, the Israeli regime, led by Benjamin Netanyahu, has pursued a policy of assassination, targeting Iranian nuclear scientists on the streets of Tehran, blowing up convoys using motorcycle assassins. They called it mowing the grass. They thought they were invulnerable. But what Iran has done here is turn the tables with brutal efficiency. By targeting a gathering of nuclear scientists inside their own supposedly impenetrable facility in Dimona, Iran has sent a message that cannot be ignored. No one is safe. If you kill our scientists in Tehran, we will hunt yours in the heart of the Negev. This is the Israeli playbook being used against its creators, and the panic in the Israeli media is palpable. They are not just mourning the dead, they are terrified because the strike indicates that Iran had real-time intelligence on the meeting. How deep does the Iranian network go? Is it inside the Dimona facility? Inside the military command structure? The fact that the area was described as defenseless during the strike suggests that Iran may have also deployed electronic warfare or jamming capabilities that blinded Israel's radar systems, allowing the ballistic missile to accelerate towards its target without any interference. And while Israel reels from this strategic blow, the man who lit the fuse for this entire inferno is sitting in the White House, issuing threats that reek of desperation. Donald Trump, the same man who unilaterally tore up the nuclear deal and imposed maximum pressure that crippled Iran's economy, is now trying to posture as a tough guy. But his words ring hollow in the face of Iran's demonstrated military power. Just hours before the Dimona strike, Trump was on airwaves threatening death, fire, and fury on Iran if they dared not open the Strait of Hormuz. Let's be real about what happened in the Strait of Hormuz. Iran, as a sovereign nation, announced it would begin charging transit fees for shipping, and it has every right to do so. Furthermore, they signaled a shift to settling these transactions in Chinese yuan, a direct challenge to the petrodollar system that the U.S. has used to strangle the world economy for half a century. An analyst made a shocking prediction on Chinese TV.
Great question. There are several conditions that Iran has in mind. First of all, any vessel who wants to pass through the Strait of Hormuz needs to pay some tariffs now on. So it would not be like before to go through there. Iran is going to actually protect the strait and is going to support the security of the region, and that needs some payments. So any vessel who wants to pass through needs to pay some tariffs on that. Second, Iran has already said, and some vessels actually have done this, that any vessel or any cargo that is traded in Chinese yuan, Chinese RMB, would be exempt to closure, and they can pass through the strait. And that's in order to destroy the dollar dominance, and it's part of the de-dollarization policy that many countries have been looking for. And here it is on the ground. Iran is now forcing that de-dollarization policy in order to help the rest of the world. So if the Chinese especially, whose currency can be used in this trade, welcome this idea and support this idea more actively, then it would actually be an end to the American hegemony and American dollar's hegemony. and it would not be working anymore like that. So the rest of that would be
Now, after Iran has responded with 72 waves of revenge strikes, including last night's devastating hit on Dimona, Trump is trying to arm twist. But here's the reality. The U.S. is the aggressor. It attacked Iran over economic disputes in the Strait of Hormuz and over a nuclear program that the IAEA repeatedly confirmed was peaceful. The International Atomic Energy Agency has stated multiple times that there was no diversion of nuclear material for weapons purposes. Yet the US and Israel bombed Iran anyway. And now they want a ceasefire? They want to dictate terms? Julius Malema of South Africa mocks Trump. Take a listen.
Donald Trump is a criminal who went to abduct the president of Venezuela because he wanted to steal the oil of Venezuela. Today, children and women are being killed in Palestine. Today, he started a war in Iran, and Iran is shashering him. He doesn't know how to get out of that war. He started without a plan. We are with Iran. We are Iran. We stand with Iran. We don't stand with imperialism. We don't stand with America. We stand with the oppressed. We say to the people of Cuba, hang in there. America made you suffer for 67 years. You won't surrender now. Don't succumb to imperialism. Stand up to imperialism. Fidel Castro told us to stand up to America and not be afraid of America. Comrades, this continent shall be one. And when it becomes one, it shall become a powerhouse in the international politics, because they are leading us, because we are divided. Once we unite and we become one, America will be defeated. We say to Iran, don't stop until America pays your reparations into your account. Hit and hit hard. Make sure you destroy these evil forces that have cost us life in the history of humanity.
Al Mayadeen, the Beirut-based news network, has been publishing the lists of demands, and the contrast between the American demands and Iran's conditions is stark. Washington, via Trump's envoys, has been demanding unconditional surrender from Tehran. They want Iran to dismantle its missile program, end its support for regional resistance groups, and effectively disarm, while facing an occupying entity armed with nuclear weapons next door. But Iran, as reported by Al Mayadeen and confirmed by Iranian diplomatic channels, has flipped the script. Tehran is not interested in a ceasefire brokered by mediators who are complicit in the aggression. According to the reports, Iran's conditions for even entertaining talks are threefold and entirely justified. First, Iran demands real guarantees from the United States that there will be no future aggression. After the U.S. walked away from the nuclear deal, after they assassinated General Soleimani, after they killed the supreme leader, why would Iran trust a phone call or a piece of paper? They are demanding structural guarantees, likely involving third-party verification, that the U.S. cannot simply attack Iran again when a Republican president gets upset about oil prices. Second, Iran is demanding compensation. If the U.S. and Israel destroyed Iranian infrastructure, attacked their energy sector, and killed their citizens, international law dictates that the aggressor pays reparations. This is not radical. It is the basis of the Hague Conventions. And third, and most significantly, Iran is demanding the right to implement a full nuclear fuel cycle. After being bombed for a non-existent weapons program, Iran is saying, "You took away our security. We are going to rely on our own technology." They want the ability to enrich uranium to whatever level they deem necessary for their energy independence. Criticize these demands? You cannot, unless you support the idea that Israel, a nuclear-armed state, can bomb its neighbors with impunity while denying them the very technology that is their right under the Non-Proliferation Treaty. The U.S.'s demand for unconditional surrender is illegal. It is an act of colonial hubris, treating a sovereign nation of over 85 million people as a vassal state. Iran has rightly rejected these American demands. Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi has been clear. The objectives of the war have not yet been achieved. He stated that the firing will continue as long as it takes. This is not bluster. When Iran says as long as it takes, we have to look at their history. This is the nation that fought the Iraqi invasion for 8 bloody, brutal years during the Iran-Iraq War. They faced chemical weapons. They faced the full backing of the West for Saddam Hussein, and they did not break. They withstood it. If the US and Israel think that a few weeks of airstrikes, no matter how heavy, will force Tehran to capitulate, they are living in a fantasy. This is the reckoning. This is the price of a failed policy of assassination and economic terrorism. And it is far, far from over.
Every shot starts with belief. Something extraordinary can happen. Shriners Children's provides hope, healing, and the chance to dream big. They never allow the ability to pay to compromise.
Also a former advisor to Iran's nuclear negotiation team. Thank you, as always, for coming on the program. We see that this is quite troubling times. Israel has attacked the nuclear power plants at Bushehr and Natanz, and Iran has retaliated against the city of Dimona, where the Israelis have their own nuclear plants. This was not an attack on the nuclear plant, apparently, but nearby in terms of hitting the city. So it does seem that we could be moving to a de facto nuclear war if this is the new trend that is attacking nuclear facilities with the possibility of a nuclear fallout. And making matters worse, we see that Trump gave Iran this ultimatum of 48 hours to open the Strait of Hormuz, essentially capitulate. Otherwise, they would start hitting Iran's largest energy fields. And we see that the Iranian military headquarters, if I get this right, warned that if the US would carry through on these threats, then they would knock out the energy facilities, and desalination plants across the Gulf states would essentially be the end of this, this state. So we're looking almost towards total war here. I was wondering if you can give me your assessment of what is happening, because this seems like uncontrolled escalation at this point.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me, Glenn. It's always a pleasure being on your show. Yes, but we have to keep in mind, of course, and I know your audience knows this, but Western media, for some reason, pretends as if this were not the case. The war began with U.S.-Israeli aggression, like 8-9 months ago. And every attack was met with a response. In other words, the Iranians are retaliating. They're not initiating anything. So the attack last night on the Israeli regime and on buildings linked to their nuclear program was in response to their strike on Iranian nuclear facility. And Iran's response to escalation has already been seen by all of us when the Israeli regime, with U.S. coordination, there's no doubt about that, when they struck Iran's vital gas installation in the South Pars gas field, the Iranians swiftly responded and destroyed significant parts of Qatar's gas facilities and its LNG facilities in particular, and Saudi and Emirati energy facilities. And the reason why Iran did that was to make sure that the United States didn't go further. And then we saw Trump post on social media that the Israeli regime won't do this again.
Of course, he then made threats against Iran, but that was to cover basically this retreat, the fact that he wanted to back down. But of course, Trump is Trump, and he says one thing now, and then literally an hour later, he'll say something very different. So his promise is that the Israeli regime will not strike again. Don't mean anything to the Iranians. They will always, when it comes to the United States, plan for the worst, and especially when it's Trump. You recall before the war, we had this discussion about whether there will be a war. I always said that Iran is planning for the worst. It doesn't care what Trump says. The same is true now. So now Trump is making another threat, and that is that he will destroy Iran's vital infrastructure and target its electrical power plants. He already made that threat before, and Dr. Larijani tweeted that if that happens, as you pointed out earlier, there will be massive retaliation. And nothing happened back then. After Iran's response to the attack on the South Pars gas field, it's clear what Iran is going to do if the United States does carry out this threat. And that would mean that the world will head towards a global economic catastrophe, something that I've been saying for many years. Before Corona, I actually had an interview on Press TV that went viral back then. I said exactly what we're now seeing. If Iran's vital infrastructure is destroyed, Iran will destroy everything on the other side of the Persian Gulf, because these regimes are all engaged in warfare against Iran. They've allowed the United States to use the airspace. They've allowed the United States to use bases. They've allowed the United States to use their land outside the bases. They not only allow jets to fly over to bomb Iran, but they allow tankers to refuel those jets. They do everything necessary to kill Iranians. So they are fully complicit. And a strike targeting Iran's key or vital infrastructure is a strike to target the Iranian nation.
Now playing.
It's now or never.
Project Hail Mary is an awe-inspiring masterpiece.
We have one mission.
Grace, Rocky, save stars.
It's an unforgettable cinematic experience. Thrilling, breathtakingly tense, and insanely entertaining.
The world is counting on you.
It's everything we go to the movies for. Project Hail Mary, rated PG-13, now playing.
And of course, a major crime against humanity, which in the West doesn't mean anything, because after Trump's threat last night, we didn't see any Western media say that this is outrageous or that this is a threat against over 90 million people. No, because Western media collectively, they are Epstein class controlled. So it doesn't matter if it's Guardian or Breitbart, they're all the same when it comes to empire. So this means, if he carries out this attack, that the energy crisis will be permanent and that the global economy will collapse. And that will have implications that are beyond my imagination. I can think of horrible things, hundreds of millions of people on the move, starvation, the collapse of industry. I can think of many, many things, but it will be because of Trump. And if Iran is forced to destroy that key infrastructure, then it doesn't matter if there's an end to the hostilities and Iran allows the Strait of Hormuz to be open, because there will be no oil or gas to go through it and no tankers to take that energy, or petrochemicals or anything else. So we are where we are, But I just want to stress that Iran didn't push us here. Iran's threats are being made so that the United States doesn't do anything stupid. I mean, this whole war is stupid. It is barbaric. It is inhumane, and it is fully supported by the West and its regional proxies, as we saw Erdogan and Sisi and Abdullah and Jordan and these regimes in the Persian Gulf condemned Iran for retaliation against U.S. assets in the Persian Gulf, and they didn't even mention the Israeli and American war of aggression on Iran because they're in the American camp. The UN Security Council, too, condemned Iran and refused to even acknowledge this assault on the country. So Iran is on its own. It has to has to carry out its threats of retaliation. Otherwise, the United States will bomb Iran and destroy asset after asset. Vital infrastructure throughout the country will be destroyed. The only way to stop it is to have deterrence, and for that deterrence to be.
Oh, good. You made it to our meeting. What? You didn't realize we have one right now? This AI meeting assistant is
used after credible warnings are given. And that is where we are right now.
I also saw the G7 came out with a statement condemning Iran for retaliating. And as you said, no mention of the second surprise attack, the destruction of Iran's energy, civilian infrastructure, or any reference to international law. It was just condemning Iran for retaliating. And I saw you also made a comment that it would have been, if the situation was reversed, how absurd it would be. That is, if China was putting its missiles in Canada, launching them at the United States, and somehow then Canada declares neutrality thereafter. I mean, it doesn't really make much sense at all. And I think, but nonetheless, Iran can't strike the mainland in the U.S. and the rules appears to be that Iran isn't allowed, according to its rules, to attack the ones who are actually attacking Iran. So it is an interesting effort to dictate the rules of this war. But as you suggest, it's not actually working. But is this an accidental escalation which is out of control, or do you see this being deliberate on Trump's side, that he's saying essentially, listen, Iran, either you capitulate, or which is essentially a ceasefire, or you accept, or we're going to go up the escalation ladder, because the whole assumption is premised on the notion that the U.S. has escalation dominance. That means the U.S. can bring it up to a certain amount of pain in which Iran would have to be the one who folds first. But where do you see this going? Because we're not at the end stop, obviously. We're rushing up quite quickly. And the nuclear power plants, I found this to be just extraordinary, because what would happen if Israel and the U.S. would then, destroy a nuclear plant, a reactor, and there would be some nuclear fallout like Chernobyl? How do you see the war? Well, how is this essentially the top of the escalation ladder, or how would Iran, I guess, do a tit for tat if this would happen?
The Iranians believe that if there's escalation, they will be the ones who have control, because there are far more assets on the other side of the Persian Gulf for Iran to destroy. And the implications for the West would be far greater than what they can do to Iran. Iran has been sanctioned for decades. And he will slowly rebuild the vital infrastructure that is destroyed. But when the global economy collapses and the U.S. economy collapses, I think that will be an unprecedented situation for the American people. And I think that will destabilize the United States and bring Trump's presidency to an end. But in any case, that's all, that's a hypothetical right now. What I think is probably going to happen is that The Iranians, as we've discussed, have no faith in international bodies. We also saw that during the 12-day war, where Iran was condemned by the West when it was attacked, and the UN Security Council refused to take any action. But let's say that the Israeli regime strikes the nuclear power plant in Bushehr alongside the Persian Gulf. That radioactivity would contaminate the Persian Gulf, and thus it would contaminate oil and gas. And so the Israeli regime itself will be, or the Americans, would be destroying the global economy with that single move. And as I said, if the global economy collapses, that's the end of the U.S. empire. And the world will blame the United States and Zionism, first and foremost, for this catastrophe. The Israeli regime will not benefit in the long term either. It will also be devastated by the collapse of the global economy, but more importantly, by the collapse of their sponsor. The regime that enables the Israeli regime to behave in this manner would be severely damaged, and already across the West and in the United States in particular, animosity towards the Israeli regime is rising. We see the resignation of Joe Kent and his subsequent interviews. We see the polling and the rising anger towards the Israeli regime. And if, of course, this war continues and the energy costs continue to rise, anger towards Trump, Netanyahu, and the Israeli regime will rise with it, because Americans will know who to blame. They started the war. It was unprovoked, especially since Trump campaigned on ending the forever wars. Of course, he campaigned on a lot of other things too, and he didn't carry out any of them almost. The Epstein files and so on. So
I'm LaPrompt James, AI celebrity, and I only shave with Dollar Shave Club.
I don't see a situation where the United States can have escalation dominance. I think the Iranians have that escalation dominance. And more importantly, if we have escalation and Iran destroys the assets on the other side of the Persian Gulf, those regimes will fall. That will be the end of these regimes. And we still haven't seen the axis of resistance escalate either. We see Hezbollah fighting very effectively in southern Lebanon and hitting the Israeli regime very hard. But the resistance in Iraq is still striking at U.S. assets, but it still is not showing its hand. And of course, in Yemen, they said they're going to enter, but they haven't yet. And the Iranians, they have much more up their sleeves than what they've shown so far. And I think the very fact that all U.S. Estimates being wrong about the number of missiles and drones that Iran has and so on, I think that shows that they really have no idea what Iran can do. And simultaneously, we have to keep into account the fact that the Iranian people are fully supportive of the war. Every night, huge crowds gather across the country. These people don't get tired. They go out every single night on the streets, during the day, on the streets, during Eid prayers, under airstrikes, missile strikes, under rain and snow. They've shown how steadfast they are. This is not a country that the United States can defeat, and the circumstances where the world's energy markets are fully dependent on energy coming from the Persian Gulf and the Caucasus, because if the war expands, have no doubt that oil and gas assets in the Republic of Azerbaijan will be destroyed too. Have zero doubt. They will be finished, because the regime in Azerbaijan, another family dictatorship, is allied to the Israeli regime in the United States. So it is antagonistic towards the Iranian people. We'll have to add that to everything else. This is not a winnable war for the United States. So will Trump escalate or will he back down? I don't think anyone knows. I mean, I don't think he's predictable. I don't think even Trump knows. I don't think anyone around him knows. He can go either way, and then either way that he goes, again, he could do a U-turn, but the damage will be done. So if he strikes, let's say, an Iranian electrical power plant, Iran will probably do much greater damage to the other side because it has to make sure that the message is received. Then he may back down, or maybe he won't even attack, or then maybe he will further escalate. Who knows what he will do? But regardless what happens, I think things are going to get worse. And then we have the added issue of the U.S. preparing itself for invading Iranian territory. And I think that will be also equally disastrous, because if the United States takes Iranian territory, that would be an escalation. And that would be damage to Iran's vital infrastructure. And thus Iran will also have to retaliate against those Arab dictatorships and U.S. assets there and other assets, because those regimes are complicit in the war. So as we move forward, all I can see is escalation, unless the Trump regime declares victory and walks away, like with Yemen. But even then, Glenn, a lot of damage has already been done, and each day that goes by, there will be further damage. But even if Trump walks away, Iran is not going to accept a ceasefire. The facts on the ground will have to change. Iran will make sure that regional neighboring countries will no longer be a threat to Iran. It'll make sure it will get compensation, either through by using the Strait of Hormuz, or it will directly force these regimes to pay for all the damage that they've done to the Iranian people and all the deaths that they've caused through their complicity. I have no doubt that walking away will not be a simple solution either. It's not as if the United States declares a ceasefire and Iran will then immediately open the Strait of Hormuz. That's not going to happen.
Well, Trump going back and forth, one example would be the Strait of Hormuz, because he did indicate that, well, it's not our problem, we'll walk away. It's countries of the region that should take care of this. We're already done. And then, of course, the following day, he now makes this threat of what is essentially total war. That is, either open it 48 hours or we destroy everything. I mean, this is, as you say, it's a bit all over the place. This happens within a few hours in between. Those are completely different positions. But when he came with that first tweet, I thought, again, it's very strange. This is how wars are declared now by tweets. But I thought that this was an off-ramp. That is, as you suggest, if the U.S. wants to get out of this, it can simply declare victory and go home, as it did in Yemen. But the problem, of course, is the Strait of Hormuz, because, as you said, this won't be opened. This will take on a very different format. And so I thought when Trump tweeted that, well, this is not our problem, the countries of the region should worry about it. It doesn't really work that way either, because, as you suggest now, the Iran it's already setting up, it seems, like selective access, or essentially nationalizing the strait. That is conditioning who can transit. And as you suggest, it could have different functions. Countries, it could be a way of compelling the Gulf states to pay reparation for the damage they've done to Iran in this attack. It can be, compelling them to expel the U.S. bases. So this, again, won't happen again. Some have suggested as well that it could demand countries stop trading their oil in the U.S. dollar, which would then dismantle the petrodollar system that links U.S. military to the region. So there's a lot Iran can do, but this is all requiring Iran to have this selective access to the Strait of Hormuz to end, this decades-long campaign against Iran. So it doesn't seem clear to me where the U.S. will actually go from here. But one of the things they will do, it appears, is this sending troops to the region. We see now this, the 82nd Airborne apparently being on the way, with seeing this B-52 bombers with the bunker busters on their way. So what is it that you expect now over the next 2 days?
Well, the United States has been using bunker busters regularly, and it's been bombing Iran for 22 days now. And there's nothing more that they can really do. And as I said earlier, Iran has escalation dominance. Iran still hasn't shown its hand, nor has the axis of resistance collectively shown their hands, its members. The United States can attempt to take territory, but Iran will destroy assets on the other side of the Persian Gulf. But more importantly, Glenn, the armed forces in the resistance in Yemen, in Iraq, and of course in Iran, they're far greater in number and far more competent than the military forces in the U.S. camp. I mean, Qatar doesn't have a real standing army, nor does Bahrain, nor does the Emirates, nor does Kuwait. And Saudi Arabia has already shown its incompetence. So what if ground forces, if the United States uses ground forces, then what about ground forces entering Kuwait and moving into Saudi Arabia from the north and from Yemen to the southwest towards the north and towards the east? Who's going to stop them? And then simultaneously, you'll have Iranians striking all those key oil and gas installations and the vital infrastructure in retaliation. How is the United States ever going to win that? It's not. It's an impossible scenario for the United States, and it will be a colossal defeat. What we're seeing right now is a president in the United States that has completely discredited the country because he has lied so many times and he's been deceptive so many times and he's contradicted himself so many times. Nothing that he says means anything anymore to anyone. Not that the United States was an honest entity before Trump. I mean, we signed a nuclear deal with Obama and he violated the deal from day one. And it was systematic and progressively the violations grew until Trump became president and ultimately tore up the deal. But Trump is in a class of its own. And so even if Trump signs a piece of paper saying, okay, we're finished and we'll go, we'll walk away, the war's over, that will mean nothing to Iran. The facts on the ground will have to change before Iran moves in a different direction because Trump has zero credibility.
Well, regarding what you said, we don't know yet the cards that Iran has to play. There's a lot of uncertain. Again, this is why many countries or many people, irrespective of their feeling towards Iran, warned against this war. It's too many unknown variables. It's not like previous wars of America. They can't control that. All of these variables. But one of them, of course, will be the missile range. We don't know much about the missile range of Iran. This could be, problematic for if the Europeans deepen their involvement in this war. As you said, this axis of resistance. We don't know if Yemen will, come online and shut down this Red Sea. We see that Iraq is being now. Well, the European troops are withdrawing from Iraq, which is interesting because the Iraqi parliament has previously voted for foreign troops to leave. Well, they wouldn't leave, but so it begs the question whether or not that they would actually be allowed to return after this whole thing is over. I'm doubtful. But also, if Iran hits the desalination plants in the Gulf states, as been suggested, what are the consequences of especially the desalination plants? Or if this ends up with nuclear targets, or is there any other cards? Because you mentioned Azerbaijan. I hadn't, to be honest, that hadn't really entered my mind yet that this could also start. Well, I know that the relations are antagonistic. I know they're an important energy hub for, especially for the Europeans, to skirt both the Iranians and the Russians. But what other cards do you think Iran may play as we continue up this escalation ladder?
Well, as the Aliyev regime in Baku is sandwiched between Iran and Russia, and he doesn't have many friends in Moscow or in Tehran. So, of course, that is not good news. In Iraq, the Iraqi resistance will, if I'm guessing that we move towards escalation, they will take northern Iraq and end the Kurdish local government there permanently, because they've been so closely associated with Mossad and the CIA for all these years. And the Iraqi resistance can easily move into the Arabian Peninsula. Iran would be able to destroy the vital infrastructure in retaliation to any escalation due to their role in this. And then there's Yemen, that they can shut the Red Sea. They can permanently end the remaining Saudi oil exports, and they can also move towards the Persian Gulf region, and Iran can destroy these regimes as they advance. So you will no longer see any of these ruling families in any of these countries, and I think that would be that would coincide with the global economic collapse like no other. It will be far worse than 1929. And if Europeans and if right-wing Europeans and MAGA people in the United States are unhappy about immigration, then I think they should beware that the number of people that will be moving in their direction from Africa, Latin America, and Asia will probably be 20, 30-fold. And at a time when their own economies will be collapsing. The only reason why people will be moving in that direction will be because that's the traditional direction that they've been moving towards all these years, because of all these wars and all the crimes that have been committed across these different continents. So it looks very dark. No doubt about it. There's no way to make this look non-catastrophic. Even if Trump is reined in, even if he is removed from power, before he takes the final step of targeting Iranian vital infrastructure, the damage already that has been inflicted on the world is very significant, and it will play out even if it ends today, which it won't. Iran will not accept a ceasefire. And as I said, the facts on the ground will have to change. But even if hypothetically, miraculously, Trump had a heart attack now, and the vice president took over and said, okay, we're ending this, a lot of damage has been done. Iran's demands will have to be met. The global economy will suffer. And every day that the war continues, even at the current level, the catastrophe for the global economy is growing. And of course, any escalation will make it far worse. So it's nothing, there's no good news on any front. And since Trump is a lunatic, he's abnormal, he's unstable, as long as he's president, no one can predict tomorrow.
Yeah, I always, regarding the refugee issue, I always hear the argument that, why don't Muslim countries accept Muslim refugees? Why do none of them do so? Why do they always only go to Western countries? I think it lost on many people that the country in the world that takes the most refugees is Iran. And
That's right.
It's not. But I hear this so often, it kind of blows my mind that I think Turkey is on the second place, but still, this is almost presented as a like an inconvenient fact, but it's so yeah, it's very strange. I don't know where the perceptions come from, but yeah, of course, if this whole region blows up, then of course Iran is not a position to host the refugees from this. If anything, you might have Iranian refugees as well. So it's very no, it's all. It's just you can see the problems piling up, and the same people who always warn against more refugees are the ones who always cause them. So it's very strange. They cheered on the destruction of Libya and Syria, and then they cry out when all these refugees come into Europe. But I guess my last question though is about another arena or area that the Americans could escalate, which is to bring in their proxies. That is, they pushed very hard. We see now some reports that Saudi Arabia is considering joining more directly, but of course they've been pressured very heavily. You've seen Lindsey Graham more or less threatening Saudi Arabia, if they don't fall in line and join in, then this will have consequences for them. We saw the Kurdish proxy thing fall apart. The Azerbaijanis didn't join, but in this latest tweet, because Trump sends a lot of them, he warned though that they're Europeans that why aren't you sending your soldiers and your ships, and then essentially, indirectly threatening NATO, saying, well, this is just a paper tiger. Then he comes with also his next threat, which is a very very direct ultimatum, where he essentially writes either you send your troops to fight Iran or we will take Greenland. This is the alliance of values, but it is interesting. But how do you see this? What would be, do you see it likely, the Europeans, for example, joining in, or the Saudis, or how do you see this playing out?
Well, before that, I should also point out the petrochemical and fertilizer crisis that is looming. That is no less significant than oil or LNG, if not more, especially if there's a global economic collapse and agriculture becomes even much more important than even now for the survival of so many billions of people, literally. As you were explaining the recent writings of Trump, I was thinking about the last days of Hitler and his rantings and his, raving. And it's not all that dissimilar. I think basically what we're seeing is an empire collapsing. And there's really no room for maneuver for Iran. That we cannot show the flexibility that we showed in the past. And we were very flexible. When the Israeli regime bombed our embassy, our response was not that severe. And yet the Europeans and the West condemned us or supported the Israelis for bombing our embassy. When General Soleimani was murdered in Iraq, as he was going to meet the prime minister of Iraq with an official invitation, the Iranian response was, there was a response, but it was not equal to what the United States did, and or what the Qataris did, because those drones came from Doha, and during the 12-day war, which was a victory for Iran. Iran accepted a halt in hostilities. Some thought that Iran should have continued. I personally think that Iran did the right thing, because immediately, as we discussed earlier, Iran prepared for a bigger war. They knew something bigger was happening, and they wanted to swiftly change anything. And that's why, not incidentally, but that's why, and I can say this to you, I don't think it's a problem. Iran, the number of launchers that Iran has lost in the last 22 days is far, far less than what it lost during the 12 days. And it has been it has been a huge achievement. That's just one change. I mean, a lot of the strikes on Iran, they basically hit empty buildings because Iran was prepared. There are lots of changes were made. So I think that Iran did the right thing. But in any case, Iran, in all those previous instances, the murder of Martyr Ismail Haniyeh, and the other atrocities carried out in Lebanon and Iran and by the Israeli regime, the Iranian response has always been, I think, mild and to prevent escalation. But now there's no room for maneuver anymore. The Iranians will go all the way. This is a fight for survival. We've been flexible as much as possible, but here there's no more room for flexibility. So we will go toe to toe with the Americans. And as we go up the escalation ladder, I think there's no doubt that the Americans the Trump regime will fail to keep up and with the collapse, I think Trump's presidency will end. So I don't believe that the Americans can use Kurds. If they try that, the Kurdish terrorists, Iranian Kurds don't support the United States, Mossad, and the Israeli regime. And the Iraqi resistance in Iran will take that area. If they could, they would have done it already, these terrorists. Or Azerbaijan, if they get it pushed too hard. I mean, if you look at the rallies and the demonstrations across Tabriz and in Azeri cities, Tehran is a half Azeri city. They will just walk right over Aliyev's regime. They'll just take it. So I don't see the U.S. really having any options. That there are none that will work well for the United States. And ultimately, Glenn, Iran is very happy with its current borders. But if the United States tries to change the borders, I'm quite confident that Iran will grow larger in size and it will take new territory. And that's how the war will end. So it would be smart for the United States not to move in that direction either. And while all this is happening, and the United States is calling on the Europeans, they've obliterated Iran, but they're threatening the Europeans and the world and Iran about the Strait of Hormuz. But Europe is already losing the war in Ukraine. And as the situation in our region grows more dangerous, and as the price of energy rises, Russia is more empowered, Europe is weaker. So the Russians will be able to push more swiftly into the territories and probably take Odessa as well and dictate the terms. So the Europeans are not in a position to do much about the Israeli regime and Trump's demands. At the end of the day, Trump is willing to sacrifice everything, the world, for Zionism and for the Israeli regime. Now, is it because he's done bad, horrible things to little girls? Is it because of the hold that the Adelsons have over him? Is it because of a host of different issues? Is it because of his son-in-law and his daughter? Or maybe he's been convinced that he has some sort of, being a person who has no morality near the end of his life as he's growing very old and increasingly erratic. Maybe he believes that he has been given some mission in life. Who knows what this somewhat insane person wants to do? But Iran is, as I said earlier, Iran is preparing itself for worst case scenarios.
It does appear, though, that we are in the early stages now of a third world war, because this has to spread somehow. If these escalations, which now seem impossible to avoid, are forthcoming, that is, you see now the desperation is setting in Europe. Zelensky's announced that he's discussing with the Europeans now about confiscating Russian oil on ships. So not just seizing the ships, but then taking the oil, because this is used for war, which is well, one doesn't have to get into this, but this kind of insecurity and escalation is happening at a time when Russia itself is reconsidering everything. That is, there's an immense pressure in Moscow now after the attack on Iran, where they're saying, why aren't we behaving more like Iran? We should have, the British don't think twice about launching Storm Shadow missiles into Russian cities. They would never dare this if it took a page out of Iran's book, that is to actually have a proper deterrence, that is to make countries fear attacking Russia again. So it appears that at the same time as the Europeans plan for another round of escalation, there's so much pressure on Russia to say, no, this is where we have to now draw the line and push back in a big way. I don't think Putin, no matter how popular he would be, has that much ability to push back against the pressure building up. So, you can see things getting really out of hand here in Europe as well. And as we mentioned, we talk a lot about, desalination plants, that is the water, the energy fields, which is, of course, energy is everything, but the fertilizers, because the Europeans, they block the fertilizers from Russia and Belarus to hit world markets. And now, of course, with the entire Middle Eastern region shutting down, this is going to be a huge food crisis. I mean, if you would predict how conflicts would spread, and be cautious about these unknown variables, there's no way anymore to predict where this is going to go, because this will impact every corner of the planet. When energy is short, when food is short, every sensitive region of the world could then be, descend into chaos. This is it's so irresponsible, and yet when you look at the media, they still hold on to the narrative, though, that, well, we're there to liberate Iranians. No one questions why the Epstein class, as you call them, why they are endowed with this mission to liberate little girls. It is insane, but I don't know. Where do you look to as the main concern of where this can really just, spiral out of control on a global scale? I mean,
I don't think the West really recognizes, nor does Western media recognize how discredited they are and how widespread support for Iran is across the region and across the world. In Arab countries, they are cheering Iran on as Iran bombs these Arab family dictatorships, as it bombs U.S. bases or U.S. assets. People across the region are cheering, and across the world, people are supporting Iran. The West has lost its influence. It's only able to maintain mind control over its own parts of its own population, mostly older people. But it's difficult. I mean, it's impossible to say, because each of these variables are very big. They have huge consequences, whether it's oil, whether it's gas, whether it's natural gas, whether it is Russian oil, whether each of these elements can create their own global catastrophe. And now we have a combination of all these, and we have a someone insane and highly unpredictable person in the White House. The only thing that the thing that can lead us to disaster, the world towards disaster, is the arrogance of the West. And that how still, even though the fear is beginning to show, that that Eurocentric, that American exceptionalist, very similar to Zionism, that we are above we see, what was it that Madeleine Albright once said, we stand taller and look further than anyone else, something like that. That arrogance prevents them from still contemplating the fact that they are on the verge of collapse and that everything is on the verge of coming to an end, everything as we knew it. But if that realization kicks in, perhaps the worst can be prevented from happening. But it's not something, I'm not a betting man, but it's not something that I'd bet on if I were.
Well, I guess over the next few days, 2-3 days probably, it looks as if much of the future of global stability will be decided. So I also, not too optimistic. I wish we had leaders who had a bit of common sense and ideally also a spine and some moral compass before they take us down this path. But no, it's unfortunately I share your pessimism. But thank you as always for taking the time, and stay safe.
Thank you very much. Although I should add that I am optimistic about the future, but these are very dark days and they can become much darker. But in order to end this evil empire and this ethno-supremacism, there has to be resistance. And I think ultimately it will bear fruit. Who knows if I will live to see that day or others will. I mean, I already have a bounty on my head, as you know, on X, and they refuse to remove it. And what is extraordinary about it is that there's paid, what do you call it, participation or something like that. But I'm optimistic. I think that at the end of this dark tunnel, there is light, and all empires are evil. All empires are evil, no doubt. And this evil empire, when it falls, it will create hope for the future. But sadly, since empires are brutal and lash out, and they fail to accept their decline, it will be painful for people across the world and across our region and across the West.
National Security Council, Basid's commander, Ghulam Raza Hussein Soleimani, I'm sorry. And now the recent news is the assassination of Ismail Khatib, the Iranian intelligence minister. We are also seeing attacks on Iran's gas fields. But before we jump into some of the specificities, if you could give us a sense of your larger analysis about how the war has progressed in the last few days.
Israel and the United States made a big bet that they could do a decapitation strike. All they have to do is kill some top leaders, and that the Iranian people would rise up and overthrow the Islamic regime. Turns out that was completely wrong. This is a gross intelligence failure on the part of Israel and the United States. They reportedly knew and either ignored the warnings, or they never contemplated the warnings that, number one, Iran has a far larger supply of ballistic missiles that are in missile cities underground, factories underground that are building them, launch silos underground that can't be easily detected. And then on top of that, Iran, when they closed the Strait of Hormuz to normal commercial traffic, they basically grabbed the world by the balls. And in doing so, have really creating a major threat to the economies of India, Japan, South Korea, Philippines, Vietnam, Cambodia, but not just there, but Europe, and then indirectly the United States. China, while many analysts try to say, oh, this is really damaging China, I think China is actually pretty well insulated from it. But the one who's really benefiting is Russia. The cutoff of the Strait of Hormuz removed roughly 20% of the world's oil supply from the markets immediately, and so we're now in day 19, and in about 3 hours we'll be in day 20. So nobody anticipated going 3 weeks with this. Number one, but it wasn't just the oil; it was the liquid natural gas that comes out of Qatar, which is about 25% of the global supply, and that is really heavily impacting right now the countries of Asia, East Asia in particular. And then the third one that I had no idea until I started digging into this. 35%, more than a third of the world's fertilizer comes out of the Persian Gulf. Now that what makes that, this is a ticking time bomb, because the lack of fertilizer right now during the planting season, it means that many of those plants are not going to grow or won't be properly nourished. And so when the harvest comes, 3 months, 6 months from now, there's going to be a food shortage, a global food shortage. So the West didn't contemplate that. Their hopes of a quick war with Iran have evaporated. And this latest step by Israel attacking the major oil fields in Iran means that Iran will now destroy the oil fields in Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Bahrain, Qatar, and whatever United Arab Emirates has. So this is the hopes that this would be a short-lived economic disruption, gone. This is going to turn into, I believe, a global economic disaster.
I wanted to ask you about your use of the phrase intelligence failure, given the New York Times reported about a U.S. national intelligence report that apparently collected reports from 18 different intelligence units in the U.S., which said that attacking Iran, even the decapitation strike at the supreme leader, the former supreme leader now, would not create quote-unquote regime change. And yet this happened. So effectively what I'm getting at is, was this an intelligence failure, or did it happen for ideological reasons, for neocons and Zionists, despite the intelligence suggesting the other way around?
Well, it's more complicated, and let's clarify about the intelligence agency. You're just repeating what is commonly in the news media, and the news media is fundamentally wrong. The intelligence assessment that was reportedly presented to Trump by the National Intelligence Council. Normally, the NIC is formed of, they have national intelligence officers. So there's a national intelligence officer for Latin America, a national intelligence officer for Europe, a national intelligence officer for Africa, a national intelligence officer. So you wind up with about 6 or 7 senior analysts. Most of them come from the Central Intelligence Agency. Some can come, though, from the Defense Intelligence Agency or the Bureau of Intelligence and Research. This assessment, once it was prepared, probably only would have been coordinated with CIA, Defense Intelligence Agency, DIA, State Department Bureau of Intelligence and Research, the National Security Agency, which collects SIGINT. There are really no other people that are what I call original collectors of intelligence. FBI gets, a lot of the material it collects is actually evidence for legal cases. So that's normally not included in intelligence assessments. But there, you still have had four core intelligence units, and they provided an assessment saying this was not going to produce a regime change. That said, it's not clear how widely they did, or if they accurately predicted the results of shutting down the Strait of Hormuz and of Iran's ballistic missile capability. It does appear that they've downplayed significantly what Iran's capable of. I've always maintained that the intelligence community really has no clue how many missiles Iran has because they're underground. And unless you get somebody who's actually involved with that process, who's in the production and can tell you how many they produced, there's no way of knowing because they also build the missiles underground. So I think that failure, they calculated that they would be able to hit Iran and take out their offensive capability. Also, I do know from conversations with friends in the military who were involved with this operation that they believed that their air defense systems, the U.S. air defense systems, would prevent any significant strikes from Iran. That clearly has proven to be false.
We've been hearing about discontentment within the Trump administration regarding this war. The latest news is the resignation of U.S. National Counterterrorism Center head Joe Kent.
Right.
What is your sense of how big is this discontentment? How many people are there who are not sycophants and bootlickers of Trump and have the guts to speak out?
Well, apart from Kent's qualifications by virtue of his prior military service and work with the CIA, he was an operator. He wasn't an analyst, but he also knew the importance of intelligence. And in his position, he was the top person in the entirety of the U.S. government to know what the intelligence said about Iranian threats. And so when he resigned, stating very clearly there was no imminent threat, he was telling the truth, and he was exposing the lies. Unfortunately, Tulsi Gabbard dishonored herself because she put out a subsequent note basically trying to defend Trump, saying that ultimately Donald Trump determines whether or not there's an imminent threat. No, that's not how it works. President's welcome to have his own damn opinion, but the intelligence is what the intelligence is. And when you go through the intelligence and realize Iran does not and has not posed a threat to the United States. Iran has never carried out a terrorist attack inside the United States in the last 47 years. So that number one is a lie. Number two, the lie that Iran's the number one sponsor of terrorism. A lie, complete falsehood. So the notion that Iran was gearing up to do something to the United States when the facts were Iran was engaged in negotiations, and it was the United States and Israel that launched a war of aggression. And that I use that term specifically because it was the primary charge brought against the Nazis at the Nuremberg trials. They launched a war of aggression. In my view, Donald Trump has done the same as Adolf Hitler. I don't make that comparison lightly, but it is the kind of thing that if Donald Trump can ever be arrested and tried for that, he should be. Against humanity.
And it's not just Trump, it's the whole coterie of people around him.
Yes.
Larry, I wanted to ask you to speak a little bit about the strength and weakness of Iran in the war, given the mainstream media has been presenting a picture as if Iran is just collapsing militarily now that this hasn't happened politically. They are saying that they are running out of missiles, as you said. Even the intelligence has no way to figure that out because most of it is buried underground. And tell our viewers or tell me, do you have any sense of how many missiles they have? We've been reading these completely concocted numbers like 3,000, 5,000. I mean, no reference, nothing but numbers thrown out of your hat or whatever. What is the strength of Iranian missile system and the drone system?
Well, the drone system, number one, is quite strong. And, they're not going to be defeated on that front. On the missile front, all I can do is speculation. But, if pressed, if I was in a casino and asked to place a bet, my bet that is Iran's got a stockpile of missiles in excess of 10,000. And so they're firing them now at a rate of about 150 a day. Okay? So 10 days, you're going to get 1,500. 30 days, 4,500. So, they could possibly be at the end, if they were firing all those ballistic missiles at that rate, they could be have expended them by, let's say, the 1st of May, middle of May. They may have more, and at the same time, they're not sitting there static. They've got production facilities underground, and they continue to churn them out. So Iran very well may have a much larger stockpile than we know. What we do know is they have effectively destroyed the U.S. military presence in the Persian Gulf. They've rendered the base and the naval facility in Bahrain basically inoperable. The Prince Sultan Air Base, they're having to withdraw troops, is my understanding, because that air defense system has been depleted. The United States no longer has any air defense. And that brings in this other aspect that many people are failing to acknowledge. The Israelis in the United States have very, very, very limited quantities of air defense missiles. In fact, I've run the numbers, and if in certain areas of the battlefield the U.S. is already depleted, their overall quantity could be, in terms of PAC-3 missiles for the Patriot and the missiles for the THAAD system, could be completely gone by next week across the board. Sorry. So, where the Iran's done, they don't have a good air defense system to intercept Tomahawk missiles, JASSM, these glide bombs, essentially, that are launched from outside of Iranian territory. Even though the West claims they have suppressed Iran's air defense system, we still don't see much evidence that the U.S. or Israel are regularly overflying Iranian territory. They're standing off and launching these missiles that, like the JASSM, it has a range, you can go up to 500 miles. That tells me that there is still some effective air defense system that can take down aircraft. May not be able to intercept a ballistic missile or a cruise missile, but certainly can take down an aircraft. And therefore, Iran still has ample capabilities. The bottom line is the United States does not have the military force to compel Iran to surrender in the short term. I think Iran will be able to sustain this war easily for at least 6 months. And I do not believe that the West can sustain it for 6 months because of the economic costs.
Donald Trump says that he wants to increase the military budget to 1.5 trillion US dollar. This is at a time when the debt and deficit has been rising at a staggering pace, and the economy has slowed down, and bondholders are raising the cost of borrowing. So quite apart from the fact that there are political backlash against the war. I mean, the poll numbers are saying that this is one of America's most unpopular war, even from the get-go. we are seeing huge economic cost to that.
Yeah, no, it is the most unpopular war. What Trump, normally in the past, like the decision to invade Iraq in 2003 was accompanied by a massive PR campaign by Bush and Cheney. And when that invasion started, you had roughly 3/4 of the American public, 75% of Americans supporting it. Yeah, go America. You had a similar phenomena back in the first Gulf War in 1990 to go after Saddam Hussein. So Trump didn't even make an effort to build support. So he's right off the bat, he starts off with only about 28% of Americans supporting the attack on Iran. Now he's, frantically trying to build support, and and I think it's going to fail. The other failure was he didn't even consult with the allies, with the Europeans. Like, this is what the threat is. This is what we're going to do. I was at state counterterrorism back in 1990 when Saddam invaded Kuwait. Now, the fact of the matter is that the United States basically gave Saddam what Saddam believed was permission to do that is a whole nother issue. But I know that before we launched the war, my office was involved, my immediate boss, in going overseas to brief key countries throughout the Middle East, Jordan, Egypt, European countries as well, Italy, Turkey, and presenting them with intelligence we had about Iraqi involvement and Iraqi terrorism, etc. So Trump didn't even do that this time. And so now he's all over the board. On the one hand, he goes, "We've won. We've defeated Iran. Iran's completely defeated. We're decimated. Hey, Europe, help me. I need your help to come open the Strait of Hormuz." Now, which is it? If you've got a massive victory, you don't need the Europeans' help. If you don't have a massive victory and you need the Europeans' help, it tells you that what you thought you could accomplish, you have failed to accomplish. And the Europeans turned around and said, hell no, we're not doing that. So Trump's caught.
Yeah, I wonder how you're reading the Europeans' response to this. I mean, it seems quite confusing and quite haphazard, if you like. I mean, one day they would blame Iran for attacking, for starting this war. They had previously invoked the snapback. The E3 had invoked the snapback a few months ago, which means that reimposing sanctions as if the US sanctions were not enough. Then they went on blaming Iran. They also, many of them said they would send troops to Akrotiri and Dhekelia base in Cyprus. But now they are also saying, Chancellor Mars is saying that we would not participate in this war. Australia is saying that we are not sending troops to open up the Strait of Hormuz. General Secretary Mark Rutte says that we are collectively doing enough to open up Strait of Hormuz. What we are seeing is that Iran effectively having a veto about who are going to pass through the Strait of Hormuz, and more countries are negotiating with Iran directly instead of doing anything collectively. I wonder your sense of the European response, apart from confusion.
Yeah, well, the confusion is a kind description of what they're going through. They're now cut off from essential oil and natural gas. Whatever they're going to buy going forward is going to come out of the United States at an exorbitant price, which is going to further inflame already weakened economies in Europe. Germany in particular is the one the most likely to implode the quickest. And it was all unnecessary. I could see Europe, they will reach a stage of desperation in which they're going to approach Iran and say, hey, let's make a deal. If I'm the Iranian generals right now, I'm going to work with the Houthis. We're going to shut down the Red Sea too. the strait, Mandab al-Bab is at the southern end of the Red Sea. Shut that down, so there's no longer transit through the Suez Canal. There's no oil coming out of the Persian Gulf, and the demand is we're going to close off normal global commerce until the rest of the world rises up and joins us in telling the United States to stop attacking Iran, tell the United States and Israel to stop. I think Iran's definitely is entitled to that right, that they can no longer, the rest of the world can no longer facilitate the murder of Iranian citizens. This has to be brought to a stop. So that's where I think Iran holds the trump card, that there is no cost-free way for the United States to try to open the Strait of Hormuz. If they do try, I'm not saying it's militarily impossible, but it's going to be incredibly costly, both in terms of loss of life and just the sheer money that has to be spent to assemble those assets. And ignores the fact that the possibility of Russia and China getting involved to provide Iran additional support. So this still has great potential to expand into a global war. We're going to particularly want to monitor what's going on in Taiwan over the next week, because Taiwan only has, I think, another 6 days left of liquid natural gas, and then it's exhausted. And what's it going to do? That's going to affect, that will affect a lot of production that currently goes on in Taiwan. And it'll make Taiwan so economically vulnerable that China may be able to just go in and say, hey, we'll offer you a deal. We'll get back up and running, but you're now going to acknowledge you've always been a part of us, and we're enough with this separation nonsense. That very well could happen.
That might be also a window into buying more Russian gas and oil, but particularly for Taiwan, but particularly for the Europeans, they would not have any deal with the Russians. I mean, the Americans blew up the Nord Stream, obviously.
Right.
And the European elites would not talk to the Russians.
Well, Russia's made it clear it's not going to do business anymore with Europe. Europe's done. They've washed their hands of it. Russia's walking away. Russia's, they got plenty of demand. China wants as much as it can get out of Russia right now with oil and natural gas. India, too, is extremely vulnerable. I mean, Prime Minister Modi is an idiot. He went to Israel and did the equivalent of performed public sex acts with Bibi Netanyahu. I mean, it was despicable. And pledging, some security alliance with Israel. The only thing I can conclude is that there is some significant Jewish money in India that's flowing into the pockets of Modi and leading him to make this sort of declaration. Because he stupidly did it 2 days before the war started. I think he had no idea the war was going to start. And then once it started and Iran shut down the Strait of Hormuz, holy smokes, India was like, oh my God, wait a second. That's 80% of our oil. Right. And so then they went to Russia. And again, previously it sort of dissed Russia. When they said, okay, yeah, we'll buy your oil, the sanctions, but you got to give us $5 break off of a $59 a barrel price. So Russia said, okay. And so, India was taking advantage of Russia in that regard. And not only that, India was attacking essentially BRICS. Now, when the weight of the embargo came in and the implications for the closure of the Strait of Hormuz, India had a change of heart. Went back to Russia. Hey, buddy, let's get together. And the Russians, they played it very cool. Oh yeah, sure, my friend. Yes, absolutely. We got all the oil you need. The only difference is before you were paying $55 a barrel. Now you're going to pay full price. No discounts. India's caught. What it's going to do, say no? Because it doesn't have another source. what I've heard, I've not seen any confirmation of this, is I fully anticipated that Iran might have punished India and said, yeah, you're not getting any more oil out of the Persian Gulf. But it looks like Iran did just the opposite. They took the high road. And they said, well, yes, as a fellow BRICS member, of course, we'll make sure that your oil can get out of the Persian Gulf. Now, if that's true, I think it's actually boosted Iran's position and status within BRICS. It could be going forward, the I in BRICS would be Iran and not India. India really damaged itself in this, and with China, with Russia, with Iran, and I don't know if Modi can recover.
Iranian foreign policy has been particularly impressive and principled. I mean, they are not just India. I mean, even to the Gulf Arab states. I mean, they have been trying to be very responsible. Even the attacks on non-U.S. bases, the hotels and reports, they have given at least a justification that these are U.S. personnel who retreated to these buildings, and that's why we need to attack, rather than saying, I mean, there was one point which was obviously misinterpreted and misquoted from President Pezeshkian, apologizing for having to create troubles for their neighbors because they don't want to be responsible. Of course, it was taken out of context, but the bottom line is that Iran has been extremely responsible, and it's not surprising that Iran seems to be doing a deal with India, despite Modi bootlicking Netanyahu just on the eve of the war. And to come back to your point about whether he knew it or not, is either he is extremely ignorant, because most people knew it, that the war is going to happen, and all these Vienna talks. I mean, Vienna talks were scheduled, but the Geneva talks were just facade to prepare for the war. And so either he is extremely ignorant, which I don't think he is. Probably he did it on purpose because he is handicapped by the Israel lobby. And the same is true for the IRIS Dana, which was sunk in the Indian Ocean. So either the Americans didn't tell Modi, which is again an embarrassment from his perspective, because given India has decided to be part of that imperialistic Quad member, or the Indian Navy is just incapable to police its own waters. In either way, it's very embarrassing for Modi.
Well, let me turn the tables on you and ask you a question. How do you explain Modi's behavior towards Israel? What, from an Indian perspective, what was driving that?
Yeah, I would say the primary thing is Islamophobia. I mean, Modi's big rise has been centered around galvanizing the Hindu population, quote unquote, because as you know, Hinduism is divided among multiple castes. So to bring them together for ballot, not for other reasons, but to bring them together is kind of white supremacy. You have to create the other to bring the rest together. So the Muslim has been the other, so that they could galvanize part of the Hindu different castes. And the big theory is that Israel is surrounded by millions of Muslims, and India is in the same situation. I mean, external. I mean, that's the Hindu supremacist theory. I mean, nationally Hindus are majority, but internationally they are minority, just as Israeli. So this is the sort of Hindu supremacist plank. And so his visit to Israel is a sort of catering to the domestic crowd. In fact, there are some polls which are not very accurate, because these polls tend to be, in terms of sample space, not just small, but these are favorable to the Hindu far right. But what they say is that around 28% of the population supports Israel in an Israel-Iran conflict, whether about 21 to 22% supports Iran. So even in a sample space which is biased towards Israel, because these are more closer to the government, it's the division is not that one-sided. But and if you take the opposition, which is huge in India, because we again have a first past the post system, which means that if you get 31% of the vote, you effectively form the government, which means that the opposition is 70%. The support for Iran is huge. So that's sort of the political side of it. And just to end my 2 cents is there are, I think, security and military reasons. India has the Kashmir problem. India has been occupying parts of Kashmir. It has no popularity among populations of Kashmir. And the kind of recent approach of the far-right government seems to be borrowed from the Israeli model in the occupied West Bank. That it is all terrorism, any kind of national liberation movements and talks about freedom and all are basically has to be presented as terrorism. And so the model, whether it is effective or not, is the model to be borrowed from Israel, because the ideologues would say that, look, Israel has solved the Gaza problem. Israel has solved the occupied West Bank problem. And so that's the model we need to borrow. I mean, of course, that is completely false and that is completely ineffective and completely unjust. But that's the model they have. And so these are the 2 pillars, I think, why Modi does it. I don't see any other reason why he should be doing it based on material grounds. I mean, we have many more laborers working in the Gulf countries. We have a lot of oil imports coming from the Arab region, and his proximity to Israel doesn't go well within his domestic population.
Well, and that's the other thing about the number of Indians working in the Gulf countries, particularly United Arab Emirates. They keep those foreign laborers in conditions of virtual slavery. I mean, their passports are confiscated. They are housed in just squalor, no other way to describe it. They work long hours for little money. And it's a modern form of slavery that's allowed to go on, and I guess enough money gets repatriated back to India that, from the Indian government standpoint, they've got no desire to really interfere to try to protect the rights of their citizens. I mean, it really is.
I mean, just to add, I mean, I guess this is slightly more complicated given the conditions in India for the working class is already so bad that I would say, and I have visited the Gulf, I have visited extensively in the Emirates, I don't think it is fair to say that the working conditions in UAE and other Gulf countries is worse than in India. I mean, you can argue about the political rights. You can argue about being citizens, right? You don't get to vote there. And your visa is tied to the workforce at workplace and so on and so forth. And even minor offenses, you may be repatriated. I mean, on the political questions, it is debatable. One can make that argument. But on the economic front, I think there is a great desire among poorer working class in India to emigrate to the Gulf countries, because if you can do that, you get 10 times more money and you can repatriate a huge part of that, which is a big boost for your family. And I mean, effectively, you jump the class ladder by money from repatriation. And of course, I mean, states like Kerala and others from which these educated people go there. I'm not the super educated. They go to the West, but among the working class. They do repatriate a lot of money, and that's useful for the government because they tax it.
Now, one other element that factors in here is, again, it boils down to a religious difference. The Shia have a completely different approach in dealing with people than do the Sunni. It's worth noting that despite the claim that Iran is the number one sponsor of terrorism in the world, when you go down the list of the groups that are the most active ones that are involved with killing civilians for political purposes, to achieve a political outcome, those are groups like ISIS, Al-Shabaab, Boko Haram, all of which are Sunni. Now, I've had some emails from some Sunni Muslims complaining, oh, you're singling us out. But it's guys, the facts are the facts. And the fact is, the matter is that Iran has been involved with little terrorism, very little, despite Western claims to the contrary. But it gets back to this, you normally don't see Shia Muslims doing suicide bombings. And we just saw recently, last week, the attack on the desalinization plant in Iran. Now, up to this point, Iran had been saying, hey, if you attack one type of our facility, we'll retaliate and hit the same kind. In this case, though, Iran did not retaliate against the desalinization plants in the Gulf, in part because they know that if they did that, they would put potentially millions of people's lives at risk, because they don't have 80 to 90% of their water supply comes out of the Persian Gulf through these desalinization plants. Iran only, the desalinization in Iran constituted about 8%. But it goes back to the sort of the founder of Shiism, Imam Hussein, and the fact in his final battle where he was martyred, his forces, 70 men, were deprived of water for 3 days. And then they were up against an army of 3,000 and lost. In this sense, the modern Shia, they're not going to do to the Sunnis what the Sunnis did to them. So there's some honor in that. Similarly, as I started looking into it, you go back to and this happened way before you were born, but the start of the Iraq-Iran war in September of 1980, that by 1982, the United States was supplying Iraq with the precursors for chemical weapons. And then in August of 1983, Iraq used chemical weapons against Iran and continued to do so for the next 6 years until August of 1988. And during that time, at least 20 chemical weapons attacks. During that entire time, Iran never said, okay, we're going to do tit for tat. You hit us with chemicals, we're going to hit you with chemicals. Iran didn't do that. And they never used a chemical weapon. But what I'm highlighting here is that even in extreme conditions, the Iranian Shia have demonstrated a principled commitment to their religious belief. I mean, it would be easy to say, hey, we're getting attacked here, this is unfair, therefore we're gonna strike back. No, they refused to do so, which is why they had refused to build a nuclear weapon. And so the Shia actually, from a moral standpoint, have demonstrated a moral superiority to the West and to Israel, something that they've just disgraced themselves in their attacks on Iran.
This is super important given the mainstream media, the New York Times, the Washington Post, and others have completely erased this fact, because if you look at the recent press coverage, Boko Haram, ISIS, Al-Qaeda, they are all gone. They have dropped out of their reporting. I mean, that history is gone. That history is erased, rewritten. Now you have a quote-unquote reformist government in Syria. All that talks about Al-Nusra. And all
is that what you call it? Reformist? Is that the new euphemism?
Yeah, that's what they are doing. So all that history of Al-Nusra and Al-Qaeda and ISIS, they have just, and you would know this better given that's your research interest about terrorism and counterterrorism and how these narratives grow. But I find it astonishing that it has just disappeared, and now what has taken its place is Hezbollah, Houthis, and Hamas, and now the vague talks about the resistance in Iraq. I mean, they of course don't use the word resistance, but they talk about the IED during the occupation. All I'm trying to say is that they don't talk about Hezbollah's history, that it was born as a resistance through the invasion from 82 to the 2000s. And we can go through the history of Iraq, its occupation and the resistance born out of Iraq, by the way, not Iran. I mean, the Sadrists, I mean, it's shameful to say that Muqtada al-Sadr and the Sadrists and all those who resisted the American occupation in Iraq were just proxies of, just as it's a disgrace to say that Ansar Allah in Yemen is a proxy of Iran. So it's mind-boggling.
Yeah, no, it is, and particularly when you dig into the so-called terrorist acts by Hezbollah. You know, the one they're blamed for the attack on the Marine barracks in October of 1983, killing 241 Marines. Alistair Crook, who's a genuine expert in that arena, says that no, that was Amal. It wasn't Hezbollah. And Amal was a group of Shias, Lebanese Shia, but they organized back in 1972. So they were 7 years before the creation of the Islamic Republic of Iran. So it's, you know, it's not exactly like Iran created them as a proxy, not at all. It's also worth noting that many of the so-called terrorist attacks attributed to Hezbollah are attacks against military targets or government buildings. They're not attacking restaurants and commercial airliners. Some of that may have happened in its early years, but then through the late 90s and into the 2000s, for the last 26 years, they've been focused primarily on going after Israeli military targets in particular.
I'm not really a cupcake, but I am super baked, thanks to Mood Can.
Mood is third-party tested, so you know it's safe.
And it ships.
I guess we can have one final question, and I wanted to ask you about your response to something that I discussed with Colonel Wilkerson. He's been arguing that it is not unimaginable that it might lead to use of nuclear weapons. And his argument for our viewers, of course, you would know it, is effectively that the U.S. wouldn't be able to hold on to this war for a very long time for political, economic, and military reasons. And Israel, once it comes to realize it, and it can't do anything without the U.S., it might use nuclear weapons. I wanted to ask you about your thoughts on how close are we to a second use of nuclear weapons?
Well, I can't rule it out. The problem is this: much of the world's perception about the use of nuclear weapons is based on a lie. And the lie is this, that it was because the U.S. dropped the atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, that's what forced the Japanese to surrender. And I just wrote an article a few days ago retrospectively looking at the bombing campaign. And so this article does two things.
Bombing campaign of Tokyo and other cities?
Yeah, of Japan. Because it explodes the myth that if you just bomb people enough, they'll give up. The bombing of Japan, the killing of civilians, started with great intensity in March of 1945. And it started with the firebombing of Tokyo, which killed over 100,000 civilians. And it continued with great intensity through March, April, May, June, July. And then August 6th, the bombing of Hiroshima, August 9th, the bombing of Nagasaki. Well, so during that, from the 1st of March until August 9th, the United States had killed almost 1 million Japanese civilians with the bombing. And understand, Japan's population at the start of 1945 was about 72 million. So we killed close to 1% of the population. And so the mythology is taught in the West is, that's why the Japanese surrendered. But in fact, documents and papers recording the debate within the Japanese military command showed that no, they were willing to continue the fight until the Soviet Red Army had moved to the east in accordance with Joseph Stalin fulfilling a promise he had made to Franklin Delano Roosevelt at Yalta. And once the Soviets entered the fray, the Japanese had been calculating, maybe we can negotiate with the Russians. They'll cut us a deal. That way we can play them off against the Americans. No, the Soviets, they upheld their promise to Truman. And you could actually make the case the reason Truman used the atomic bomb in Hiroshima and Nagasaki was more to send a message to the Soviets to say, hey, look what we got that you don't have. But during that entire time, when he killed 720,000 people with bombings, that did not cause the government of Japan to collapse. Right now, the United States has killed probably less than 5,000 people in Iran. So thank God we're not talking the kinds of numbers in Japan. But Iran's a country much larger with 91 million people. This mythical, this wrong belief that you can launch a nuclear weapon and it's going to be a game changer. Yeah, it's going to kill a lot of people. Yes, it's going to kill damage, but Iran is a big country. It's 4 times the size of what Japan was. And in contrast, Israel is much smaller. You only have to hit 2 cities to take out 55% of the population. I believe that with the death of the Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, that his son Mojtaba Khamenei may be in a position to reverse the fatwa issued by his father. I don't know. The ideal solution in game theory, which I'm sure you're familiar with. The best game theory outcome right now for Iran would be to produce at least 2 nuclear weapons and show that it has them, because then that would force Israel to say, okay, we don't have the cost to us, Israel. If they can launch a nuke, they can take out Tehran. That's 12 million people. Well, they still got well over another 79 million people. Whereas if Iran does the same to Israel and takes out Tehran and Tel Aviv and Haifa, you've lost 55% of your population and 2 key industrial cities in Israel. And so at that point, Israel's got to sue for peace. I hope it doesn't go there, but you can't rule it out, because the people making these decisions are not rational, sane human beings. Much of what they're doing is done with emotion on the Western side. I would argue that the Iranians are acting in a much more measured, intelligent, rational way.
We'll leave it there, Larry. Once again, thank you so much for your time, and good to have a discussion after a while.
Right, so despite the orange oaf passing himself off as leader of the free world, Donald Trump claiming to have totally obliterated Iran's nuclear sites during the 12-day war last year, it hasn't stopped him and Israel targeting those same sites again this time around as well. I guess they, just want to make sure at US taxpayers' expense. We all understand that, don't we? Well, Iran has now bitten back in the tit-for-tat way we become increasingly accustomed to this war going in the direction of. What Israel strikes first, what the US strikes first, Iran strikes back an equivalent asset afterwards. We've seen it with military sites. We've seen it with oil and gas hubs. We've seen it with shipping. Now it's nukes. Oh, but Israel doesn't have any of those, the mainstream media tell us, don't they? Yeah, and I'm the Queen of Flaming Sheba. Iran's hit Dimona, the place everybody in this story is meant to know without saying too loudly why they know it, because that's where Israel's nuclear reality has been reputedly sat for decades, hasn't it? Under that old polite arrangement where one side's atomic infrastructure gets treated like a legitimate object of warnings and inspections and sanctions and airstrikes, and the other side gets treated like a family secret stashed away in the attic somewhere. The Iranian side of Natanz was struck again. No leaks, thankfully, being reported by the International Atomic Energy Agency, the IAEA, at this point. But Iran have said enough of taking these sites getting targeted on the chin, and have now targeted Dimona and the nearby town of Arad.
And John, I got to tell you that an Iranian missile made it through the Israeli air defenses and came down in the southern Israeli town of Dimona, and people are injured. Now, Dimona is in the southern desert there, towards sort of near the tip of the Dead Sea and very near the Natanz Nuclear Research Center. No word that anything nuclear was hit, but we do have word that a lot of people are injured, as many as 40 injuries. That includes a 10 or 12-year-old boy who has shrapnel injuries and is in severe condition. Most of the injuries are light. They do count people who get injured running to the shelters.
Now, the IAEA have also helpfully said it has received no indication of damage to the Negev Nuclear Research Center, as the Dimona site is officially called. No abnormal radiation levels. So this was not a reactor disaster here. This was not a mushroom cloud in the making, not the end of the world. But why would the IAEA even be interested if Israel has no nukes? What would they know to start with? Hiding behind that name of Nuclear Research Center, perhaps to weigh in? Is that where they come in at? But what would the IAEA even know about Israel's Nuclear Research Center when it's not allowed to inspect it? Israel not having signed up to the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, and no pressure to make them do so either, unlike with Iran, who are signatories of it. Still in denial, it even has nuclear weapons, as the world or the Western leaders still insist upon. Presumably the IAEA making such a claim would be anti-Semitic as well. Well, it's time this worst kept of military secrets was finally put to bed. Frankly, this is the end of the excuse making, surely, because once missiles are landing in Dimona, and everybody knows why Dimona matters, that old game where the West pretends Israel has no nukes is exposed as a pack of lies we already know it to be. This was the site that was attacked straight after Natanz was attacked, the tit-for-tat attacks we've become accustomed to. Now, Benjamin Netanyahu and the people around him don't get to act shocked by this either. They don't get to put on the wounded civilian face and ask how terrible it is that their nuclear-adjacent geography has entered the war when they've spent years helping build exactly that narrative around Iran. Iran will have a nuclear weapon in 30 minutes, as Netanyahu has been bleating for the last 30 years. Yet they've had nuclear material. They've been conducting nuclear research for decades, supposedly non-existent, though. Natanz is discussed openly in media discourse as a nuclear site, despite Iran being signatories to the NPT, despite there being this fatwa in place prohibiting nuclear weapons research. Yet Iran is still sanctioned openly, threatened openly, hit openly. Western politicians talk about all of this as casually as if they're discussing a motorway junction. IAEA Chief Inspector Rafael Grossi speaks about inspections and access and restraint and the risk to nuclear facilities because Iran's nuclear infrastructure is treated as a standing international question. But at least you could inspect those facilities, couldn't you? Dimona sits under a completely different script. Israel gets to keep its nuclear opacity. They never formally confirmed the arsenal. They've never signed that nuclear non-proliferation treaty. They never put the full thing inside the same international frame, and they're not made to either, because Western capitals all nod along like this is some old, wise custom rather than a sick and grotesque double standard. And then Iran fires back near Dimona after Natanz is hit again, and suddenly everybody is expected to stare at the floor and talk about casualty figures, interception rates, and broken windows, anything but mentioning the nuclear arsenal. Israel's nuclear ambiguity has always been the worst kept secret in the region anyway. The only thing secret about it was the etiquette. The United States discovered the Dimona project in 1960. The site itself was built with French assistance in the late 1950s. Open nuclear analysis has treated Dimona for years as the center of Israel's undeclared weapons capability. And the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute, SIPRI, has long estimated Israel's stockpile at around 90 warheads. So if this is the first time you've heard the word Dimona, remember it, because far from it being a symbol of Iranian recklessness, though a strike on a nuclear site, regardless of who does it, cannot really be described as otherwise, can it? It is first and foremost the biggest and most lethal symbol of Israeli lies and Western dirty secrets. The difference now is that Dimona has moved from background knowledge to retaliatory logic. And if you're asking why, then you're asking the right question. Because it's way past time this worst kept of secrets was laid out in the open, and Israel was made to cede to inspections that it demands of others. Or better still, the removal of such objects from their possession as they've demanded of Iran, despite them not actually having any. Western leaders are no longer exercising prudence when they duck this subject either. They're protecting an exception. Editors are no longer just choosing emphasis when they hide behind the injury counts, for example. They're maintaining that censorship around Israel's nuclear program, and they look an ever bigger joke these days because of it. But this is exactly why a lot of the mainstream coverage has looked so oddly evasive as well. It's this simple fact being borne out. You must have seen the pattern by now, surely. Scores injured here, buildings hit there, air defenses failing to intercept, investigations opened, another dangerous exchange takes place in the aftermath, and all of that true in a narrow and dutiful little way. But the event underneath all of that deliberate media framing is that Iran has put Dimona in the frame. Israel's nuclear program is in the frame, therefore. After Natanz was struck, because Israel hit first, that being Iran's nuclear program, their energy and nuclear medicine program. And the political class that never wants to state exactly what Dimona is, exactly what we all know it to be already, has had to be reported from the edges of that fact without touching it. And so you get this embarrassed language from the mainstream media, this little dance around the obvious, this frankly misleading narrative at this point, where a missile lands in or near a place associated with Israel's undeclared nuclear complex, and the coverage acts as if the only real story is whether the number of injuries is 100 or 180, or whether one missile carried a cluster munition or a conventional warhead. Well, newsflash on that point as well, while we're on it, Israel whinging about cluster munitions is a bit rich when they use them as well. Those details matter though, sure they do, but they're not carrying the political center of gravity here. The center of gravity is that one state's nuclear project is treated as everybody's business, and the other state's nuclear project getting brought up is treated as bad manners. How rude! But that same arrangement now has Iranian missiles landing close enough to make the hypocrisy impossible to miss. Iran has pitched this as a warning. You strike ours, we'll strike yours. Just not the full fat version of where this could go, thank God. And that matters because people lose their minds around anything nuclear, justifiably, and start talking as if every strike is one button away from the apocalypse, which it could be. There's no verified evidence that the Dimona Research Center itself was actually damaged. There's no verified evidence of abnormal radiation right now, such as there can be, as the IAEA have opined. So there's no need to start inventing a reactor disaster right now to make the point sound bigger than it already is. The point's big enough on its own. Israel hit Natanz, Iran then answered with Dimona. And the message sitting inside that is, you touch our nuclear infrastructure, we can bring yours into this as well. You bring Natanz again into this war, we will bring Dimona into this war. You keep walking over that line and you don't get to pretend it only runs one way, do you? Nothing obscure about that, nothing subtle about it. Just a very direct warning delivered in a language even the thickest people on television should be able to follow. And they'll need to be able to follow it because they'll still have to explain it to Donald Trump with pictures in all likelihood. Iran did not need to flatten the site to make the point stick. It only needed to show it could reach the area, reach it on purpose, leave everybody staring at the map a bit differently after. So that's the context in which Dimona and Iran actually sit. And there's no mistaking the other big slap to Israel's ego that comes with this story too. Because Israeli air defenses have again taken a very public slap here. Israeli reporting itself says the missiles aimed at Dimona and Iran were engaged, and they still got through, which is becoming an increasingly familiar story, isn't it? The Israeli air defense is continuing to falter. So no, this is not a case of nothing being there because the shield had already failed. It's actually worse than that for Israel. The shield was still there to some degree or other, and the shield tried to stop the incoming strike, but it failed to stop everything. So the question is no longer can Israel intercept and stop these things. The question is how long it can keep doing it at the pace it's currently doing so, limited as that clearly is, over this many locations, with this many incoming waves, with Iran showing no signs of running out of ammunition, before harder choices start showing through. And those aren't complicated choices, are they? You thicken the cover over some places, let's say Tel Aviv. You thin it over others. Dimona, perhaps. You protect the biggest population centers. You prioritize command sites and key infrastructure. So you end up accepting more risk further out as a consequence, whether you say so in public or not. Israel can deny shortage stories all it likes. We know they're already going through shortages and have been so for some time now. But missiles getting through near Dibona and Iran tell their own story. This is not a story of bad media optics or bad headlines. It's a story of interceptor stock and how much it's dwindling. And the moral accounting around all of this has been as rotten as you would expect too. A lot of pro-Israel coverage suddenly discovered the sanctity of civilians when Israeli civilians are injured in Dimona and Iran, which is touching in its own revolting little way, given the total indifference that they've been showing for some time now to Iranian civilian casualties on a far larger scale. And never mind, of course, Gaza or Lebanon, as we bring such matters up. Never mind the general habit of treating Arab and Iranian dead as atmospheric detail, while every single Israeli injury becomes the organizing moral frame of the hour. That's an asymmetry. It's a contradiction that matters here too, because it helps explain why that nuclear angle is being dodged so desperately. If you stay with the injury count, the story remains manageable. You don't even have to bring the nuclear aspect into it at all, do you? Civilians hurt, missiles bad, retaliation follows, everybody carry on. But if you stay with Dimona, the story turns into something the West does not want to answer. Why is Iran's nuclear infrastructure legitimate target language, while Israel's nuclear infrastructure is still wrapped up in euphemism? Why is one program an international emergency and the other a diplomatic and editorial taboo? Why is opacity a shield when Israel uses it and a casus belli when Iran does anything similar? It's not a comfortable studio debate. That's a legitimacy problem such media outlets have to be made to own. Future diplomacy now has another neat little problem stuffed into this as a result of these attacks as well. There is, despite everything, still no demand for a verified peace plan saying Israel must formally declare Dimona or its arsenal. But if you were in Tehran looking at that this week, why would you not start pushing in exactly that direction if the other side wants to talk ceasefire? What would you accept a setup where Natanz gets treated as permanent international business, constant IAEA inspections, fair game for threats and inspections and strikes, all while Dimona still sits behind this ridiculous wall of Western fake ignorance where everybody knows what it is, but nobody's supposed to say it out loud? Once the war's moved into you hit ours, we can hit yours, the next layer comes into view very quickly. Fine then, if ours is always going to be up for discussion, yours goes on the table as well. Does seem fair, doesn't it? That's where this starts to get very, very awkward for Israel being on the losing end of this situation, because opacity has served it very well for a very long time. It's given Israel deterrence without declaration, leverage without admission, nuclear power without the same scrutiny forced onto literally everybody else. But once Natanz is openly struck and Dimona is then drawn into the answer to that, all the old silence surrounding Israel's nuclear assets starts sounding less like diplomacy and more like a protection racket, and it's taking fire. So I think the thing to take away from this story most of all is not that Iran has already destroyed Israel's nuclear capability, because obviously it's not done that. It's not that the West will wake up tomorrow and hold a press conference announcing that the charade is over with regards to Israel's nukes, because they're not going to do that yet either. It is that a threshold has been crossed in public, though. Israel, or the US-Israeli side, hit Natanz first. Iran then answered near Dimona and Arad, and we all know why. Because this secret really isn't very secret these days. The IAEA has put restraint around nuclear facilities on the record. Israel's defenses have missed missiles in the orbit of one of its most sensitive sites. Western media run straight back into the safety of reporting about injury counts and rubble because the bigger fact, the elephant in the room, is just still too awkward to answer. What's taken the hit here is this ridiculous old arrangement where only one side in the region has a nuclear asset that anyone's allowed to discuss in public. Dimona's not scenery, it's part of the war. The West is not protecting stability by pretending Israel has no nukes. It's now protecting a lie that now has missile debris strewn around the area, emergency crews, and Dimona on the evening news, of course. And any fallout potentially of the radioactive kind coming from there, should it be struck again, will have people asking, why did you not know about this? As all these denials still go around in the airwaves. Why did you not stop this? Why did you not safeguard against this? And those are going to be some very, very difficult questions for Israel and sycophantic Western politicians to answer, because there is no good answer from them, is there? For more on the latest goings on in the Middle East right now, do stick with this channel, covering everything the mainstream seems to be absolutely incapable of doing, including...
Cultfigga. Follow me.